Good evening. I'm Carolyn Rye, Chair of the School Board of the City of Virginia Beach, Virginia, and I hereby call this meeting to order at 6 o'clock p.m. on this 25th day of January 2022. Pursuant to the school board's reopening plan adopted August 10th of this year and the school board vote on August 24th regarding health protocols for school board meetings, it's determined physical distancing will be used in chambers as a health mitigation strategy. Members of the public, as always, will be able to observe this meeting through live streaming on vbschools.com, broadcast on VBTV channel 47, and on Zoom. We welcome everyone joining us in person this evening and those who and our viewing public as well. With that, Madam Clerk, would you please note who's in attendance?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Present in school board chambers is Chair Rye, Ms. Anderson, Ms. Franklin, Ms. Holtz, Ms. Hughes, Ms. Manning, Ms. Owens, Ms. Riggs, and Ms. Weems. And attending via Zoom is Ms. Melnick and Ms. Felton.
Thank you. And for the record, Ms. Melnick is zooming in for health reasons, and Mrs. Felton is in Richmond representing us in all the districts in the Tidewater region in her capacity as Tidewater VSBA chair in Richmond today and this evening. So would you please, all present now, join me in a moment of silence. And please stand as you are able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Right. There are no recognitions this evening, so that leads us to adoption of the agenda. Any modifications? Okay. Hearing none, a motion to approve. Mrs. Riggs, and a second, Mrs. Franklin. All in favor, please show a raised hand.
Ms. Felton, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Melnick, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have a unanimous vote. The adoption of the agenda did pass.
Thank you. The next superintendent report is due at our next meeting, so that leads us to...
Madam Chair, we do have superintendent's report.
This is the...
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, and good evening, Madam Chairwoman and members of the board. So here are just a few items of interest for you and for our families to know. First, just a reminder to families and staff that February 1st is a staff day, so there won't be any school for students. Additionally, when students return on February 2nd, that will be the beginning of their second semester. Throughout January, we've been able to recognize our principals and our student activity coordinators. You know, in Virginia Beach City Public Schools, we are very fortunate to have over 80 distinguished school principals and directors in support of education in our 86 schools and centers. This group of staff works tirelessly to ensure that more than 5,000 school staff and 65,000 children are provided with a new learning environment each day that's safe, loving, supportive, and caring, all while cultivating incredible learning experiences. So thank you so much for an amazing job. Well done. Also this month, we honor our student activity coordinators. I think we all know these staff members serve as liaisons for various athletic and academic teams, clubs, and special interest groups, and that their important work ensures well-rounded programs are offered to the entire student body. I hope we all know how hard they work. They're always in our buildings, and they work incredibly hard. And for all of this and more, we offer our gratitude for what they do. So if you haven't had an opportunity to thank these individuals, it is not too late. When you see these outstanding staff members, say thanks, or so you can send a card or share a shout out on social media, acknowledging the hard work of your principals and student activities coordinators every single day using the hashtag #WeAreVBSchools. This year's division-wide United campaign wrapped up in late December. Through all, in fact, more than $80,000 of those donations were allocated to 6 designations, which included the United Way Community Care Fund, which disperses money to local nonprofits and is used for needs-based situations as well as emergencies like floods, fires, and yes, even a pandemic. The other top designations were our own Virginia Beach Education Foundation, the Food Bank of Southeastern Virginia, the Children's Hospitals of the King's Daughters, the Virginia Beach SPCA, and the American Cancer Society South Atlantic Division. And so we want to make sure we thank all of the generous folks in our schools and on our staff who made that possible. Additionally, if you didn't yet have time to make a donation and still wanted to do so, you can email mary.norton@vbschools.com for available options and assistance. And from the bottom of my heart, again, I want to give thanks to everyone who donated time and money and energy to this worthwhile partnership. And finally, earlier this month, our Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion hosted the 14th annual African American Male Summit. This event is our school division's Male Leadership Empowerment Summit, open to all male students in grades 6 through 12. This year's theme was Portraits of Success, Living Out My Worth. Students, staff, and families participated in a hybrid summit, which allowed both face-to-face and virtual engagement options. And I have to say we were very thankful to have Dr. Makola Abdullah, president of Virginia State University, as the event's keynote speaker. Hundreds of participants were able to engage in breakout sessions focused on academic excellence, team building, and leadership development. And there were also sessions for parents to learn about division initiatives, community resources, and available opportunities for them and for their children. So if any of our students have not attended previously, I hope they will join us next year. This event is filled with hope and excitement, gratitude, and leadership, and I know I, for one, am thankful to be a part of it each and every year. Thank you again to our Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and all the staff members who made this event successful for our students. Thank you, Madam Chair. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Spence. All right, now we will address approval of the meeting minutes from our January 11th organizational and regular school board meeting. Any modifications to these minutes? All right, hearing none, a motion to approve. Mrs. Hughes, and a second, Mrs. Manning. And so all in favor, kindly show a raised hand for those who are present.
Ms. Felton, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Melnick, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have unanimous vote. The minutes did pass.
Thank you. All right, public comments. The school board will now hear public comments on matters relevant to pre-K to 12 public education in Virginia Beach and the business of the school board and school division from citizens and delegations who signed up with the school board clerk prior to noon today. Persons not called to the podium to address the board are reminded to be respectful of speakers so that the school board and persons observing the meeting are able to hear and observe each one's comments. Speakers signed up to speak will be called up at 3 at a time. We ask that you line up when your name is first called, and anyone outside chambers will be brought into the hallway. In-person speakers will be called first, followed by student speakers participating through Zoom or by telephone. After the student speakers, in-person speakers will be called followed by speakers participating through Zoom or telephone. We ask that you begin speaking once your name is called, and as a reminder, you have 3 minutes to present and will be offered a 30-minute reminder before time expires. We ask that you're free to refer to the online tracker to keep track of your time. Once your time has expired, kindly leave the podium to allow the next speaker to begin. If a speaker is not present when called to speak or is not online when called to speak, the school board, at our sole discretion, may allow the speaker to speak at the end of the public comments section. And in accordance with newly amended bylaws, we will suspend if necessary public comments at 8 p.m. to hold the information session of the meeting agenda, and we will then return to public comments prior to the consent and action sessions of the meeting. As always, we invite the public to submit comments through our group email account, which can be found on our website. So with that, Madam Speaker, would you please introduce the first speaker of the evening?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our first student speakers will be Natalie Rash, Jules Owen, and Rowan Riley.
Welcome.
Hello again. My name is Natalie, and I would like to talk about my great day mask-free today. I didn't get a nosebleed today, and I probably won't anymore since I can be mask-free now. I wasn't hot and sweaty all day and could talk to my friends normally. I played and hung out with both of my friends that wore masks and did not wear a mask. And they were not afraid of me or my other mask-free friends. Everything was normal, and no one cared about who was in a mask or not. Hopefully my nose acne will go away now that I can be mask-free. Today was the best day in the last 2 years of going to school. Thank you.
Please, next speaker.
Our next speaker is Jules Owen, then Rowan Riley, then Allie Anthony.
Welcome.
My name is Jules Owen. I have been gladly today to not wear a face mask today. I was happy for my friends to wear free face masks. I could finally see their smile. I could finally breathe without wearing a face mask. For after 2 years, I was happy. But when I was on the bus, it was still okay because we have some people that still don't wear their face masks on the bus. Thank you for letting the people that let us don't wear face masks. Thank you.
Our next speaker.
A kind reminder to our audience to please refrain just so we can keep this moving along. Thank you. Okay, welcome.
Our next speaker is Rowan Riley and then Allie Anthony.
My name is Rowan Riley, and I'm a freshman at Kellam High School. Today was my first day back without being forced to wear a mask since the 7th grade, and it was definitely a better experience for me as well as my friends. Masks have caused many problems for children my age, older, and younger. Masks prevent easy socialization, and it promotes us to isolate ourselves, which is not healthy for students of any ages. Being able to see my peers' faces makes school genuinely better. Considering that today was my first time I'd seen many of my peers' faces in almost 5 months. I think it's absurd that you're thinking of changing it back and keeping us all in masks when you aren't the ones that have to attend school for 7 hours daily and constantly be reminded to keep your mask on when it's been proven that only a properly fitted N95 mask is capable of preventing the virus. So it should be a choice. We are not asking you to force anyone out of mask or make anyone do anything that causes them to feel forced. We are simply asking that you give us a choice to wear or not to wear a mask. America is all about freedom, so why should mine be taken away because of everyone that's scared? Are you saying that my opinion has any less value than theirs? I just want to be able to breathe freely and see my friends' faces at school. So all I ask of you is please leave it as it is and give our parents and us students a choice. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Allie Anthony.
Before I start, I just want to say I think we should wear masks to keep everyone safe, including students, staff, and the family members at home who could actually be at risk. Hello, my name is Allie Anthony. I'm a sophomore at Kellam High School. This year I took AP European History, and for this class we read a 40-page chapter and take notes on it on our own, and we have a test on it in 2 weeks. With the 4x4 schedule, I would have to do this in 1 week, along with all of my other classes. The schedule is supposed to prepare us for college, but instead you are pushing us way too far. A lot of the kids don't even want to go to college. College classes are 2 to 3 times a week. High school is 5 days a week. For my AP History class, I get 3 to 4 assignments a day. Most of the time, I don't even get 20 minutes to work on it in class. But with the 4x4 schedule, they would have to be turned in the very next day. And there's a chance for these classes to be all year. What about study block? Yes, there's kids who take 2 of them and are in the easiest classes possible. What about the kids who take hard classes? Study block is the time we can retake and take tests or even get help. We already don't have 1 lunch. I have a friend who wants to take 5 AP classes next year, and you're saying that because of this new schedule, we can't even have a class to help out with our work? Next year, I want to take AP Chemistry, Advanced Fashion Marketing, AP Calculus, AP Lang, AP US History, and then Interior Design. And now I have to take another class, all because people in higher ranks want to change things up to something they think will better kids, but instead will make things worse. You're not asking what we want. You're making decisions for us. What if you have all your hard classes one semester and all your easy classes the other? So the thing to do would be to try and change it, right? Except last year, the majority of the people I talked to weren't able to make a change. Exams and SWLs are at the end of the year, so if you have to take it your second semester, you're fine. But all your hard work put in the first semester would just be lost because kids will be focusing on classes in the second semester instead of trying to remember everything from the first. College students get a final exam at the end of their classes, but for us, it would have been at the end of the year. So you're not only putting a bunch more work on the kids, but also on the people who make the schedule. So really, what is wrong with the schedule now?
Do you like the 4x4 schedule?
No.
No.
No. No.
No.
No.
No. No.
No. No. No.
No. No.
No.
No. No. No. No.
No.
Why don't you like the 4x4 schedule? I think that although the 4x4 schedule can give us a little more of a condensed class load and let us focus on just a few things at a time, it does give AP students a disadvantage when exams come around. Having a whole semester between when you take a class and when you take the final exam can really have a negative
30 seconds.
I do not want a 4x4 because while teachers teach us in a 4x4, they give you homework every night, and not everyone has time to do homework every night.
I asked over 40 kids and they all answered the same way. I asked more kids in class and they all answered the same way. No one wants to do the 4x4 schedule. It's just more work on the kids. So I really ask you please to think about the kids and the situation. Thank you.
Madam Chair, we're going to move on to our online student speakers. First speaker is Emma Pyle. Please unmute.
Welcome.
Hello, my name is Emma Pyle, and I think that students should have to wear masks in schools because as a student, I feel that today seeing half my class unmasked was very hard for me, and I just felt like freaking out, and I just all out panicked because I feel like this COVID is going in a wave. When we're going down, the numbers are going down. When people are more careless, and then the numbers go up, but then they go down again because people are more careful. And no one's really making any sense to me because as a student, I feel that some people have their own opinions and some people disagree with them. But I think that the best thing for everyone is that we should wear masks because everyone wants this COVID to just go away. So if we want it to go away, then why are we being that careless to being allowed to take our masks off in school? I'm 9 years old. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Bria Eggers. Please unmute.
Welcome.
Bria Edwards, please unmute.
We'll see if she comes on later. Okay.
We'll move on to the next speaker, Jaina Selteziak. Please unmute.
Welcome.
Hello. As you may know, I am Jaina Selteziak. When I was 3, I got swine flu. I soon recovered from the illness, but 10 years later, after many tests, was diagnosed with narcolepsy, which was caused by my swine flu. That short-term disease gave me a lifelong disability. Because of it, I have to take summer school to have enough time to rest during school day. There are already cases of people developing disabilities after COVID infections. How many other students will have to face what I do? How willing are you to have your consciences weighed down by the COVID cases that could have been prevented by masking in schools? People claim it is their right to not have their children masked in schools. What about my right to have a safe environment to learn, to feel safe in school, to not have my narcolepsy be made worse by COVID? And why is it that students can go around without masks in school, putting others' health at risk, but God forbid we show our belly buttons without getting detention? And what about our teachers' rights to a safe work environment? So many have been driven away by COVID and the workload it's caused. And you are combating this by giving middle school teachers an extra class? it seemed like half my English class was in a mask, which is a risk to everyone in school. By the end of this year, will we even have any teachers left to learn from? And I also have something to read from Ava, a student from Salem High School, who says, despite the fact that today is only the first day of the lifted mask mandate in Bbcps, I already feel unsafe in my own school. Walking through the halls in classes, it is nearly impossible to social distance 3 feet away from others. That, on top of some students choosing not to wear their mask, COVID cases are bound to rise in the district due to easier transmission of bacteria. As someone who has tested positive for COVID in the past, I understand the effects that it has on your body. No one should have to go through that. I, among many others, believe that it is unfair to be put at risk to a deadly virus. I understand rules are put in place as part of the mitigation process, but there are individuals that choose not to follow them. On the bus this morning, there were countless students not wearing their masks. The drivers did not say anything. By bringing back the mask mandate, students can be held accountable for putting others at risk. I go to school to learn. I shouldn't have to be scared to learn. Thank you. And thank you for listening.
Madam Chair, online speaker number 2 is no longer there, so we move on to our in-person speakers. First, we have Kathleen Slindy, Dawn Newman, and Amber Thompson.
And welcome.
There we go. Sorry. Can I start again? Good evening, Chairwoman Rye, Vice Chair Melnick, Dr. Spence, and school board members. My name is Kathleen Slindy. As president of the VBA, I would like to convey our disappointment in this board's decision to put the health and safety of educators and students in jeopardy by repealing the mask requirement in our schools during your last meeting. We are disappointed because in making that decision, this board voted to act against your own policy, which was previously to follow the science in making decisions around COVID. There has been no change in the science, showing masking to be the single most effective COVID mitigation strategy in the classroom, so educators can only assume this decision was made for political rather than safety reasons. I heard from many of the educational support professionals and teachers after your decision, and believe me, I get it. It was definitely a no-win. There are people on both sides of it. That said, the decision to allow parents to opt their child out of wearing a mask, thereby removing the most effective mitigation to stop transmission of COVID, placed students, parents, and educators in physical and emotional turmoil again. So we interjected fear and anxiety back into our schools for what purpose? It certainly had nothing to do with teaching or learning. Your employees, bus drivers, teachers, guidance counselors, cafeteria staff, custodians, teachers, assistants, administrators, and all our substitutes from the community and our central support staff were all left holding the bag, trying to support students who come to school, a place where it is supposed to feel safe to learn. And to reiterate, Bbcps had a plan. It followed science and Virginia law that told us to use the CDC guidelines. It looked at local data, and it kept our schools open. It provided more stability and structure than we had had in the previous year and a half. The need to pivot was not there. Allowing political pressure to decide what we would do in our community was not the right thing to do. The job of a school board, according to the National School Board Association, is to advocate for equity and excellence in public education through school board leadership, not through a political agenda. Educators, like the rest of the world, would love to go back to normal. We're tired of this pandemic roller coaster ride too. But in the meantime, those educators and school employees who want to have a voice in the decisions that affect their working conditions and their students' learning conditions can join the VBA and its members as we continue to organize for collective bargaining. It is evident that no one else is coming to save public education. We are going to have to do it ourselves.
Our next speaker is Dawn Newman, then Amber Thompson, then Kathleen Brown.
Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Dawn Newman. I'm a high school math teacher. Again, I thank you for serving your community in this capacity and for making difficult decisions. As I said before, I do not envy you. There is no way to make everyone happy, and I feel the constant mask debate has kept us from having meaningful conversations. As an active, engaged member of the Education Association, colleagues often ask me questions like, do you think the school board knows XYZ? My response is typically no. The school board probably does not know XYZ. I remind them that this board is like a captain of a ship. A captain does not know everything that goes on in his ship. He does not know the details and challenges that a cook faces while preparing meals for 5,000 sailors, or the details and challenges faced by the propulsion plant mechanics as they try to fix a broken reactor. The captain is only as good as the information he gets from his officers and crew. You as a board do not know the needs and challenges of your employees unless they tell you. You do not know the nuances and benefits of a program unless DOSL gives you such information. In short, you only know what you are told. Therefore, it is important that you hear from all stakeholders on issues that affect our schools. The working conditions of your employees are the learning conditions of your students. Collective bargaining allows those of us who work in schools to have input into what our working conditions look like. Class size, effective use of planning time, and school calendars are all topics of interest to employees and students. Collective bargaining will give the crew members of this ship a real voice in making change to improve working and learning conditions. In that vein, I'd like to add to the 4x4 presentation that you were given during last meeting's information portion. Since tonight, the 4x4 is on the action agenda. My school held staff information sessions just last week. How are stakeholders supposed to ask questions and express concerns when such an initiative is being fast-tracked? I am not opposed to change. I want to be sure that before you vote to change in the high school schedule, you have all the information you need to make an informed decision. Next year, all teachers will be using the Canvas platform. This is, again, more change for teachers to learn and use. Lessons and assessments in Schoology do not transfer over to Canvas with the push of a button. In talking with my math coordinator, I learned it is taking him 1.5 minutes to change one question from Schoology to Canvas. The work I provided for the asynchronous learning day had 30 questions. That is 45 minutes to change from one platform to another. When next year will I have time to convert everything from Schoology to Canvas? My
30
point
seconds.
is, next year's teachers will be learning Canvas and adjusting to a new schedule. Do we need this much change all at once? A calendar note, if you approve the 4x4 schedule, you must allow for 2 staff days between semesters, because second semester will actually be a whole new roster of students and new preps for many teachers. Please ask good questions and get solid answers before you vote in another change.
Our next speaker is Amber Thompson, then Kathleen Brown, then Thomas Coant.
Welcome.
Good evening. First, I want to let you know that you have overwhelming support for the decision you made last week regarding masks in the executive order. Thank you. We see mandates being lifted and/or struck down all over the country, as well as the rest of the world. It should always be a choice, especially when it comes to children. This isn't normal, and it should never be made to seem normal to them. We are their protectors. We're always supposed to make sure that they know everything's going to be okay. When there's a tornado, a fire, an active shooter, God forbid any of these scary events, do we sit there and tell our children to be scared and that they could die? No, we comfort them and we tell them everything's going to be okay. We should never put that burden on them to carry. At the special meeting last week, I felt our children had a target put on their backs by comments made. It was as if there would be a terrified child sitting next to my diseased animal of a son. There are parents and teachers openly calling for segregation. What year are we living in that this is a thing? How did we get here? I understand there are emotions on both sides of these issues, but to have educators using language like this on social media and other places is frightening. It has been made to sound as if people like me who would like the choice of masks don't support our teachers. And that couldn't be further from the truth. We've all taken on way more on our plates than we can handle these last 2 years, but the most vulnerable of us all are these children. When we put these labels on them and put thoughts into their heads that they should be afraid of each other, that is no different than bullying and intimidation. Just because one side may be louder at a school board meeting, let's not forget the harassment that happens behind the scenes. No one is banning masks or putting others in danger by simply sending their child to school. This issue has become less about health and more about a political divide and vengeance. Recently, I watched a video of a Fairfax school where the children were actually getting a mask break outside in 24-degree weather. Instead of COVID, they were succumbed to possible pneumonia while enduring freezing cold temps. So let's not diminish the health and safety concerns that we have for our children due to the prolonged mask wearing. Their health should matter too. I keep hearing wearing a mask keeps kids in class, but how do we know? We haven't done the opposite for the last year. I have a 1-year-old who is considered vulnerable. I have friends with immunocompromised children. They are all suffering and they still want the choice. I can't believe I'm still here having this discussion with you all after Thursday, but it seems like there's a potential for some backtracking. I urge you not to let a move like that be your defining moment. This was such a huge step on Thursday, and we cannot confuse these children any longer. We are successfully 1 day into this.
30 seconds.
We owe it to these children to let it play out. It was so heartwarming to hear the kind messages put out by principals and the kindness between all students, mask or not today. Let's all follow suit. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Kathleen Brown, then Thomas Coant, and Mendy Huff.
Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Kathleen Brown. I want to first start by thanking the administrative staff for all the great information that was provided today in the workshop. My son had a very positive first day back at school without a mask. He considers it his first day because the last 2 years feel lost to him. I'm also grateful for your vote last Thursday to follow Executive Order 2 for the most part. I understand there's a lot of folks that are concerned, and I truly believe that time will show the same thing as other districts that aren't forcing masks. I think the data is going to show those numbers soon. I am disappointed, however, that it took you all an executive order for the board to vote in favor of parental choice. I hope that once this new data comes out, teachers will also have the same option as students extended to them. The parents have told you for months the same code in the new executive order, which is Virginia Code 1-240.1, which I'll read again. A parent has the fundamental right to make decisions regarding the upbringing, education, and care of the parent's child. I didn't really
Homeschool is an option.
feel good when I got the district-wide email where it said the line, "This is the only parental right granted by EO2." My trust has eroded a little bit from the board, so I just want to say that I kind of wondered where you meant with that, and I've heard some chatter. There may be a new motion on the floor tonight regarding masks. I believe the information presented by administrative staff is adequate, that you need to keep your focus off of making new motions. There's plenty of important educational information to discuss tonight, such as the new scheduling proposals. I want to end on the newest information put out by the VDH, which says masks made of plain cloth, masks that are soiled or poor fitting, and masks that are not properly worn provide reduced to no benefit. Most of these masks are not being properly worn. Most of them are soiled. They get wet within 30 minutes. You guys know that. You're wearing them right now. So let's focus on the scheduling and the students, and let's get back to doing what you're supposed to be doing and not telling parents how to parent their kids. Thank you.
Let's focus on teaching kids the proper way to wear masks.
Mendy Huff, speaker number 7 canceled, and then it'll be Teresa Salud.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. First, let me thank those of you who voted to allow parents to choose whether or not their children wear masks all day in school. I'm glad that you finally returned the children's health care decisions to their parents where it belongs. That being said, it is now time to make the same decision for all the teachers, administrators, school employees, and for school board meetings. We all deserve to decide whether or not to wear a mask. It astounds me that those who oversee the education of our children willingly choose to be ignorant about this widely studied issue. Studies on the value of masks against viruses concluded long before this pandemic that there's virtually no value in covering one's nose and mouth with whatever sort of fabric or material.
Incorrect.
The proliferation of the Omicron variant has proven that masks are useless. In virtually every location where face masks were mandated, the spread of Omicron has been as rapid and in some cases more rapid than areas where masking is optional.
Incorrect.
As educators and those who oversee them, I would expect that you would actually find out the efficacy of something before mandating it. A study by the CDC in October indicated that Americans were adhering to mask mandates, but that didn't appear to have slowed or stopped the spread of the virus. It also found mask wearing has negative effects, which include distorting and hiding facial movements and expressions, which enable nonverbal communication. These visual cues are indispensable to teach reading and speech, and also contribute to children's growth in proper social conduct. Masks also contribute to fear in children, as we have heard tonight. Children don't only suffer when they wear masks, they also suffer when their teachers do so. Furthermore, it's time to remove the mask mandate at these meetings. The only thing masks do here is prove that you have power over those who monitor and may want to critique your actions.
Incorrect.
Masks dehumanize people by hiding facial expressions which enable nonverbal communication and provide the cues that build trust and empathy with each other. We are made in God's image. and faces, a major part of that image, are being masked and hidden from view. Hiding the human face is, in essence, hiding God. The latest mask mandates have been implemented for the political benefit of those in charge, not for the security of those who might be at risk from this pandemic. They serve to constantly remind us that we should be afraid of the unseen virus and of those with the power to mandate our behavior.
Our next speaker is Mindy Huff, then Teresa Salud, then Lindsay Riley.
Welcome. There is no greater priority than the health and welfare of Virginia's children. Under Virginia law, parents, not the government, have the fundamental right to make decisions concerning the care of their children. As a parent, I believe wholeheartedly in the above statement. Hence is why I'm here to advocate for my student. When the school year began, the district and the board put forth mitigation procedures to return to in-person learning. By following the CDC recommendations, although there are several, including wearing a mask, I want to bring attention to one in particular: social distancing. We are not Disney. Our school did not magically increase square footage to accommodate this recommendation. This was a concern of mine while attending my students' open house. I shared that concern with every teacher and the principal at that time. We still have classes with desks, 4 desks, pushed together with students facing each other. Students are assigned seats. While there is no way social distancing can be obtained with 25 to 30 students in a classroom, I found some security with the mask mitigation being in place. There's nothing that we can do to fully protect our students from the virus. However, there are steps we can take to reduce the possibility. Our family has taken additional steps to help protect our student by dropping her off and picking her up daily from school. Some families are not able to do that because of work and other activities. Our family was able to purchase KN95 masks for our student. Some families are not able because of the cost. With that being said, if this board is truly for parental rights, then consider also the rights of the parents who have a grave concerns with their students being in close contact for hours at a time
30 seconds.
with students who are not wearing a mask. Our family know all too well the devastation of this deadly disease. We have lost several family members and friends that have succumbed to COVID. The virtual option is a way for some parents to protect the health and the welfare of their children. I ask that this board do everything in their power to consider those parents as well and open
And that
up
is
virtual
time.
learning. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Teresa Salud, then Lindsay Riley, then Aaron Rash.
Hello.
Welcome.
So, elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds, I just want to tell you, our school district took in a total of $47.2 million just in the CARES Act, the CRRSA Act, and now they're slated to take the ESSER 3 at $54.9 million. For all three of these, the grand total of roughly $102.2 million. My thoughts are, how much has already been spent and on exactly what items? What still remains of this money, and will it actually fund getting the kids back to the respectable intellectual levels they deserve, as if the pandemic never existed? Did any of the funds actually go to cleaning and installing of ultraviolet lights into the HVACs in every school building in the city, so students and staff were protected from the circulating air containing the deadly virus ravaging through the students and staff. What strings are attached? When the school board members decided to take federal dollars is what inquiring minds want to know. Is it to encourage more masking of children and to set up vaccination clinics on school grounds causing mental and physical abuse? Masks and vaccinations are not slowing the Omicron spread. The problem is the community's critical thinking and research on the virus science has been severely paralyzed by fear. You continue to instruct the children in fear by your actions when you are sitting on the dais with the ineffective masks. It's okay because I know what ideology you are. I will be calling the
What does this have to do with anything?
to report your deliberate disobedience of his executive order on optional masks to give parents the right to health care decisions for their children. If you don't cease and desist with the teaching of critical race theory or
Desist.
each
Cease and
teacher will be
desist.
reported. Going against the executive order is going against the citizens who elected change and common sense to be brought back to our great state. Thank you and have a great evening.
Our next speaker is
Executive
Lindsay
order
Riley,
violates
then Aaron
law.
Rash, then Janair Davis.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Today was the first day in almost 2 years that my asthmatic son attended school and didn't feel uncomfortable or need a mask break, so that was amazing. Today, my 2 high schoolers who are new to Kellum, they were able to actually see some of their classmates' faces for the first time ever since starting there in August. They were like, wow, some of these boys are actually cute. I never saw their faces before. They were excited to go to school today, and all 3 had great days, which is awesome because that has not happened for a very long time. This is what we need to have happen consistently. You made a choice to allow parents to have a say in what's best for their children to mask or unmask last week, and I have to say that was the right decision. Now, it is unfortunate that I've heard that Mrs. Anderson, who attends crowded weddings unmasked and who even said in the last meeting that her own grandchildren attend school in Florida where masks are optional, is thinking about a new motion. And I want to ask you this, Ms. Anderson, why is optional masking okay for your children and grandchildren but not okay for mine? If COVID is so dangerous, why are we attending large family gatherings, weddings unmasked for just a few weeks ago? This hypocrisy, it needs to stop. At what extent do my children have to participate in your self-image?
Note that Youngkin's children attend school where masks are mandated.
To live in your fear or opinion, especially when people like Ms. Holtz and Ms. Anderson pull the whole do as I say, not as I do, rules for thee but not for me. It's very hard to take leaders seriously and respect their decisions to keep your child in a mask when you see them out in town shopping, like Ms. Holtz without a mask, or at large family events like Ms. Anderson. Somehow that's safe, but my child sitting in a class isn't safe. It's time to give parents and students a choice, and I'm looking forward to this being over soon. I want to move on. I want my children to like school again. It is not your job as school board members to analyze or interpret the law. I think it was smart to allow for this to be settled in the courts, and in the meantime, respect our new governor and the executive order and allow parents to do what is best
The
for their
illegal
children.
executive
And I also
order.
just wanted to bring up another thing that we haven't talked about is the testing for unvaccinated athletes. I think it's discriminatory. As we can all see, my sister is actually a 5th grade teacher who is vaccinated, and she has COVID right now. People that are vaccinated can get and spread COVID just as easily as unvaccinated, and you're just discriminating against the unvaccinated athletes. Let's test them all. If we really care about who has COVID and who's spreading it, let's test them all, or let's test none of them. It is not
30
fair to
seconds.
isolate these kids out and make them feel different or like they're doing something wrong because they're not vaccinated. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Our next speaker is Aaron Rash, then Janair Davis, then Carmen Johnson.
Welcome.
Thanks. I honestly can't believe we are here again to possibly discuss the governor's clear executive orders. It's funny, I saw everywhere
That
today,
violate
kids
law.
every day, and everyone was respectful of one's choices. So if the majority of kids can do it, why the adults cannot? If you're reconsidering to not comply with the executive orders, then right now, in this moment, you are teaching children, hey, you don't have to follow the rules if you don't like them. You're showing it's acceptable.
No, that's what the governor
adults
did with his
cherry-pick
executive
whose
order.
rules they follow and respect, as long as those rules align with their own personal opinions. My children, along with many others, had to follow the rules over the last 2 years. We didn't like them, we didn't agree with them, but you know what? We sure as hell had to follow them. My children will be following these executive orders to a T because those are very clear rules now, whether you agree with them or not. Let's stop the fear talk of being around unmasked children. It's not my child's job to make you or your family feel safe and healthy as grown adults. You have masks, shields, the vaccine, and whatever else you want to protect yourself. When you decided to become a teacher, especially at an elementary level, you knew that you'd be puked on, have a Band-Aid to put on a bloody scraped knee, be exposed to strep throat, lice, the flu, and every other virus. Yet up until 2 years ago, you were not actively trying to force our children in a mask. Why?
Because they
it's
don't
not
kill
about
you.
being scared. It's about you wanting everyone to live like you and to conform to your same beliefs and opinions. And while that's simply not how freedom of choice works. Dave Chappelle said it best. I support anyone's right to be who they want to be. My question is, to what extent do I have to participate in your self-image? This statement was made in different regards, but can most certainly be applied here today. We have every right as parents, children, colleagues, employees, just as simple human beings, to not be forced to participate in any other person, parents, school board, or teacher's fear, opinions, or beliefs. Freedom of choice is not selfish, but expecting and forcing all others
You have a choice to
live like
homeschool
you and be like you
or private
is
school.
very selfish.
Our next speaker is Jaina Davis, then Carmen Johnson, then Lucia Owen.
Welcome.
Hello. Good evening, Chairman Rye, Vice Chairman Milk, board members, Dr. Spence, and all those assembled here this evening. My name is Jaina Davis. I serve as the student representative on the Portsmouth City School Board. I come to you all today to address your school system not having a student representative on your school board. I would think the fourth largest school district in Virginia will have a student representative on their school board. There are 4 cities in Hampton Roads who have student representatives: Portsmouth, Norfolk, Newport News, and Hampton. Suffolk, Chesapeake, and Virginia Beach do not have student representatives. I serve over 14,000 plus students in Portsmouth. I am the 5th student representative in Portsmouth's student representative history dating back to 2016. I believe that Virginia Beach Public Schools should add a student representative to their board to represent the 65,000 plus students of Virginia Beach. You might ask, why does Virginia Beach need a student representative? Students' concerns need to be heard. Most students aren't going to tell an adult because they feel as if the problem isn't going to get solved. Adults can't represent students like a student can represent a student. VSBA's policy states that the student representative on the school board has to be a 12th grader, and the alternate can be a 12th or 11th grader. I hope you all take this idea into consideration. I will be glad to have a conversation with you after this meeting. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is Carmen Johnson, then Lucia Owens. Speaker number 14 had to cancel, and then will be Virginia Booth.
Welcome.
Hi. Good evening, Chairperson Rye, Vice Chairperson Melnick, school board members, engaged parents, teachers, and concerned citizens of Virginia Beach Public Schools. My name is Carmen Johnson. I'm the school board student representative for Norfolk Public Schools. First off, I just want to say I do not support the Virginia Beach City Schools dropping the mask mandate. You have many students who attend the Magnet School, Governor School for the Arts, located in downtown Norfolk. The Virginia Beach City Public School students attend classes every day with students from 6 other districts. Not only are you putting your own city at risk, but you are putting 6 other districts and their families at risk. You are telling the students of Isle of Wight, Chesapeake, Franklin, Suffolk, Norfolk, and Portsmouth that they don't matter. So I ask you, do you think that they matter? Do you think that your students and their families are the only schools, is the only school district that matters? Because I have 6 other districts who would strongly disagree. With that being said, I speak for 36,000 plus students in my city to make sure their voices are heard and their needs are met. Since I've become the student representative for Norfolk Public Schools, I have had numerous students from your city specifically, including students from Kellam High School and Princess Anne High School, come to me about how to become a Virginia Beach School Board student representative. So how do they become a student representative for the city of Virginia Beach? The students of the city want their voices to be heard, and their voices deserve to be heard. Wouldn't you agree? I not only encourage you to begin the process of obtaining a school board student representative this year, but I encourage you to obtain 2 student representatives, seeing as how you have more students in this city than the cities of Norfolk and Portsmouth combined. 2 cities that both have student representatives on their public school boards. Show your students that you value their voices and their input. I'd like to remind you that without students, there are no schools. Without schools, there's no school board. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is Lucia Owen, Virginia Booth, and then Chris Just.
Welcome.
Hello.
Good evening, school board members. My name is Lucia Owen, and I'm the mother of a second grader in the Virginia Beach Public School System. I'm here tonight to discuss the topic of the masks and Governor Youngkin's Executive Order number 2. Today was a good day. It was a really good day. These children across the city and the state were able to smile and breathe without having to cover their faces, as they have for nearly 2 years. My child is an exceptional individual. She's taken everything sorry, this is going to get me a little broken up, but she's taken everything that has been dealt with her with stride. Her classmates, her friends, other students, they've tackled a remote learning environment while in kindergarten, managed the inconsistencies between the classroom learning and remote learning of last year in first grade, and has powered through the difficulties since the fateful Friday the 13th in March of 2020. Fast forward to today. For the first time in nearly a 1/4 of my child's life, she was able to go and attend school indoors and share her smile with others. I wish you could see it because it's beautiful. She's done everything asked of her. All the way from quarantining when my husband was exposed to somebody with COVID, to even quarantining for herself because she had Omicron at the beginning of the month. Myself, her, and her 14-month-old brother, my son, all had Omicron, and we all made it out, and we're fine. She stood strong through it all, but when it comes to school, her smile has never really shined since March of 2020. But that changed today. Her smile was big and bright as ever. She was very excited to return to a sense of normalcy, where she was treated as a child and not as a biohazard. I chose to come tonight not because of any political affiliations I have, but because my daughter and the severe effects of these mandates they have caused her. These children are suffering, as you heard tonight. They will have significant emotional and psychological issues for years to come because of how they've been treated.
It's better than
The majority of
death.
this board voted on January the 20th to respect my right to choose what is best for my child in terms of her health. I have done so by allowing her to enter the schools without a face mask, as she has now COVID antibodies. I am asking this
30
board
seconds.
to
COVID
continue with
antibodies
the same
mean nothing.
understanding that this is the parent's right and choice to determine what is best for their children's health and not the school system. Thank you and have a good night.
You can always leave the school
Our
system.
next speaker is Virginia Booth, then Chris Just, then Kendall Meadows.
Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Jenna Booth, and I'm a resident of Virginia Beach, and I love this city dearly. This is where I met my husband, where I had our babies.
Ma'am, I'm sorry. Can you please mask up?
Oh, yes,
Thank
of
you.
course. I noticed someone else was out with masks. Can I start over since I was interrupted? No.
I'm sorry.
Okay, this is where I met my husband and where we intend to send our kids to school. No, my kids are not currently in the Virginia Beach school system, and honestly, thank God. When COVID hit, we did the best we could do with the information that we had at the time. But now it's been 2 years. 2 years of actual data that we can look at and we can reflect on. And statistically speaking, COVID poses no risk to our children.
Bullshit.
There are roughly 74.2 million children under the age of 18 in the United States. And according to the CDC this morning, do you know how many have died of COVID? 862. That's a percentage of 0.001. According to the Virginia Department of Health, during Omicron, the outbreak regions with restrictive masking policies showed similar rates of transmission as regions with less restrictive mask policies. The CDC has also admitted that cloth masks, which most kids wear, do not stop the transmission of that variant. So, now that we've established that COVID is not a risk to our kids, and the use of masks is not effective in stopping the Omicron variant, which we know is the dominant strain in the United States, what can we establish? Well, we can establish that our kids are falling behind. Children learning to read cannot see their teachers' mouths move or hear them properly enunciate their words. Your children, your grandchildren, can't see a smile of encouragement from their teacher's face after a job well done. Think about that. Think about that. They're missing social cues, expressions, and we've substituted screen time and we're calling it social interaction. These things matter and they affect the psychological development of our children. At this point in the pandemic, anyone that wants to get vaccinated can. Of course, for our children under the age of 5, we've already established that it poses no threat to them. So why are we asking them to mask? Is it because you're afraid? Mask up. But are you actually asking our children to carry your burdens and fears on their backs? Or, on this case, their faces? Are you actually afraid of COVID? The answer is no.
Yes,
If you were
yes, I
actually
am.
afraid of COVID, you would not have the audacity to attend large functions like a son's wedding, maskless, Miss Anderson. So what is this about? It's about power and control. You've had it for 2 years and you're fighting to keep it. But guess what? Gone are the days where parents no longer pay attention to who was on the school board or what they're talking about in school board meetings. We're paying attention, and trust me, we care. So in closing, I'd like to say, don't get too comfortable in those seats. We see you, and you're cowards. You're hypocrites, and you're all very replaceable. Thank you.
This time. Our next speaker is Chris Just, then Kendall Meadows, then Bridget Groves. Chris Just.
Go on.
Our next speaker is Kendall Meadows, then Bridget Groves.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm a parent of 2 Virginia Beach students speaking to you so you can weigh opinions of parents who demand personal choice against input from those who believe in science. Science tells us coronavirus can be deadly. It tells us that Omicron, though less often deadly, spreads readily and can cause severe or long-term illness, and yes, even death. You must weigh the voices of constituents who trust the CDC, whose world-class epidemiologists on the matter of masking have found that 1. COVID-19 is predominantly transmitted by inhaling virus-laden respiratory droplets and aerosols. 2. Masks reduce the emission and inhalation of these particles by the wearer. 3. The community benefit of masking depends on reducing emission and inhalation. And 4. More than 50% of people carrying COVID-19 are completely unaware. The CDC reports that in community-level analyses, at least 10 showed new infections fell significantly with mask mandates. And in 3 of these, fewer deaths resulted. On the USS Theodore Roosevelt, requiring masks reduced infection rates by 70%. In schools, U.S. counties without mask requirements experienced larger increases in pediatric COVID rates last year, and outbreaks in K-12 schools were 3.5 times more likely in districts without mask mandates. Some news outlets have reported that cloth masks worn by many students are useless, but the CDC disagrees, acknowledging that more layers, higher thread count, and better fit improve filtration. But it says, well-designed studies have shown that multi-layer cloth masks block the exhalation of most large droplets and 50 to 70% of aerosols. Again, more than 50% of people exhaling infectious particles don't know they carry the virus. Another argument suggests there are ill effects of masking. But in studies of school children, as reported by the CDC, no adverse effects have been shown on heart rate, oxygen saturation, or other cardiopulmonary concerns.
These are true.
Found masking the lower face had an effect on a child's ability to read emotional cues, similar to wearing sunglasses.
Another true comment.
Effects amount to this. There have been some self-reporting of acne,
30 seconds.
itching, dry skin, discomfort breathing during exercise, and a headache. So there's your dilemma. Do you protect children from the chance of acne or discomfort, or do you increase protection as much as 70% for an entire community? Children, teachers, staff, the elderly, and healthcare workers. From a virus that the world's leading authority on infectious diseases tells us can be deadly even in children. A virus that, by overburdening our hospitals, makes other health problems, ones that are treatable when there's room in our
And that is
facilities,
time.
also deadly. Thank you.
Madam Chair, we're going to move on to our online speakers. Speaker number 1 is not online, so we'll go to state.
What about number 18?
I will call for him again. Chris Just. Oh.
Number 18.
Sorry. Bridget Groves.
Welcome.
Good evening. Can I actually pull my mask below my nose because my glasses are fogging?
please proceed and let's see how this goes.
Today, my son went to school without a mask. I asked him how his day was. He said it felt like freedom, that he could be a good boy. I wanted to address the possible revoking of the mask optional decision. To finally be free of being mandated to wear masks in school has been a long time coming for we, the parents, as well as our children. My son prays every single night that he doesn't have to wear a mask to school anymore. Governor Youngkin's executive order, as well as Virginia Constitution, clearly states parents have the fundamental right to make decisions concerning the upbringing, education, and care of our children. Both give us the right to decide whether or not our children should be or shouldn't be masked. If you revoke your decision, you are creating more frustration for these children who have now been told they don't have to wear them. My son was a kindergartner at John B. Dye with extended day kindergarten when this all started. Since the pandemic starts, I've watched my son, who loved school, was learning, become frustrated, angry, sad, and not like going to school when they returned. The science behind these masks shows children's IQs are 20% lower, and they show a 25% lower cognitive learning skills. Oxygen deprivation also kills brain cells, according to science. I urge you to leave the decision to whether our children wear masks to school or not up to us. We live in the land of the free and the home of the brave. If we are brave enough to not wear masks, you need to let us have the freedom to make that choice. Thank you.
You put other people at risk, though.
Madam Chair, now we will move on to our online speakers. First speaker will be Stacy Martin. Please unmute.
So excuse me a moment, is number 1 offline?
Number 1 is offline,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Martin.
Thank you. Good evening. So I find it incredibly ironic that for today's agenda packet, you'll be discussing Bbcps Policy 3-66, which says in Section A, and I quote, "It is the desire of the school board that the facilities of the school division be made accessible and usable by persons with disabilities in accordance with state and federal law and regulations." I simply do not understand why metrics are not part of the unmasking conversation, especially because you have an obligation to students with medical 504s and teachers with disabilities. I urge you to create a metric-based plan for unmasking and remasking that takes community percent positivity into account. Unmasking at 40% positivity for a virus that has an R0 of 7, to me, is a clear violation of your own Disability Policy 3-66, a clear violation of Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and a violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. At the very least, you should stand up immediately a virtual option for students with 504, an in-person learning program for students with 504s at several locations across the city where masks would be required, and or approve all requests for homebound instruction for those with 504s that want it. There are 7 states with pending lawsuits related to unmasking and students with disabilities. In the first few cases, they have ruled that not having masks is a violation of American with Disabilities Act and the Individuals with Disability Education Act. 7 states. Virginia will make it 8. Thank you.
Our next
Very good
speaker
argument.
is Kristen McDonald. Please unmute.
Welcome.
Hi everyone. I'm the parent of a Virginia Beach 3rd grader, and there's so many things that I wish I could talk about tonight, and I really wish it could be an actual conversation with answers to my questions, but with the 3-minute format and no responses, I'll stick to expressing my frustrations with last week's vote to follow the governor's EO versus following state law, science, and CDC guidance. And I'll be talking about my decision to homeschool because of it. Masks don't magically work one week and then not the next. No new research came out, no new data to say that masks don't work all of a sudden. While I know many will disagree with that fact, it is a fact that the CDC changed its recommendation to say using better masks, not none at all. And not only masks for some based on your political alignment, but masks for all. We all know what actually did change last week, and that was politics. A new governor came in, and instead of sticking to the facts, Instead of sticking to expert recommendations and public health guidance, you chose to follow politics. The administration's recommended compromise, Plan C, was just Plan A wrapped up in fancy wording. Fancy wording doesn't protect my child. There was no real plan, no metrics, nothing for those of us who need protection. In an effort to appease a local political group instead of protecting all children in the public as a whole, you took away the ability for parents like me to protect their children and myself, because I am someone who needs protection because I do have a condition that makes me more prone to serious disease. Other boards are standing up for students in public health. Why aren't you? Now, I know some, like Mrs. Hughes, will say, but you can send your kid in a mask and protect your child. But again, to quote so many people I usually don't agree with, facts don't care about your feelings. And the fact is, the masks work best when everyone is wearing them. Everyone, not the kids whose parents want them to versus the kids whose parents want their freedom protected over health. The Virginia Department of Health was posting this just last week about how everybody should be in a mask and a better mask at that. All students need to be wearing them for them to be an effective protective measure. Let me be clear that I don't want to be in masks forever. Please don't put that on me when you talk about what I say tonight. But we're in surge. Why can't we get through this together? With last week's vote, you have breached the public's trust in your ability to lead. I no longer have confidence in this administration to protect my child and educate him to look at facts and to think critically, as a school system should. Nor do I have faith in the boards.
30 seconds.
And to vote in accordance with all children's best interests. So as of third quarter, I will be homeschooling my son, protecting him and educating him, since you won't. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Suzanne Saltesiak. Please unmute.
Welcome.
Hello. Thank you. My name is Suzanne, and I am another parent of 2 Virginia Beach students. I want to come today and talk to you about safety, but it seems that this discussion has come down to rights. So let's just start there. My children and those in our schools have the right to a safe environment for their education. So let's talk about what's safe. The American Academy of Pediatrics currently recommends universal masking in school. The Virginia chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics released a statement saying that it strongly recommends children continue to wear masks while COVID-19 infections rates remain high. The Virginia pediatricians make the strong recommendation that children wear a well-fitted mask regardless of vaccination status. Are high. So if my children have a right to safety, but the governor's possibly illegal order said parents have a right to make decisions about masks, what are we going to do? Well, this isn't the first time that we've dealt with this. For quite a while, smokers asserted that they had a right to smoke. Sure, they do. But after numerous court cases, it was very well established that your right to smoke did not supersede another person's right to health. Basically, your rights end where other people's rights begin. We do this in schools as well. We have peanut-free classrooms and lunch tables because your right to a peanut butter sandwich does not supersede another child's right to safety. So now we come back to safety. Speakers come in and assert that COVID is not that bad. But I know of one contracted staff member that died last week on the day of the meeting and another in a hospital right now with COVID. And I hear from people like Emma's mother. Emma is a senior at Green Run. She had COVID a few weeks ago, stayed home for a week, went back to school as she was allowed. This weekend, she was on a monitor in the hospital because COVID caused her to throw a pulmonary embolism. She may have had a stroke. She had 0 pre-existing conditions and was in good health. Her mother asked me to pass this on to you, that just because people recover from COVID doesn't mean life goes on like before. Kids like her daughter aren't a statistic. They are loved people with a future that has probably now been irrevocably changed. She isn't a number, she's a human
30
with a right to
seconds.
life and safety. 3 weeks ago, she was worried about homework, and now she's worried about her heart. And she isn't the only child in our school system dealing with this. So I ask again, what are our rights to safety? What are our rights to keep our children safe? We elected you to protect our students and community, and you have failed. While 58% of school boards overseeing almost 70% of Virginia school children did protect them.
Our next speaker is Elaine Lombardi. Please unmute.
Welcome.
Hi, am I on? Hello?
Yes, hello, Ms. Lombardi. Please proceed.
Hi. Thank you. Good evening. Firstly, imagine you trying to use
She writes, I am a retired pediatric RN as well as a disabled veteran and the parent of 2 children, a junior at Lansdowne and a 2-year-old. We are an extremely high-risk family. My 2-year-old daughter has a severe immunodeficiency that prevents her immune system from functioning properly and who requires immunoglobulin infusions weekly in order to thrive. She had a mild case of COVID in August 2020. However, 6 months afterwards, we discovered the permanent lung damage it left her with. To this day, almost 18 months later, she is still plagued with extreme fatigue, a diminished sense of taste and smell, and she runs fevers almost every day. We rely on the CDC guidelines to help keep our family safe. EO2 directly impacts us. My son has an IEP, so he needs to be in school in person. BBCPS didn't offer a virtual option for him, so universal masking helps keep him and others safe in school buildings. Masking is the biggest piece of BBCPS layered mitigations, and quite frankly, the only one I've seen happen, haphazard as it may be. BBCPS doesn't offer screening tests, contact tracing has been stopped, and quarantine measures have been eliminated in the high school population. While I do believe all parents should have the right to choose what is best for their child, there should be reasonable limitations. Other parents' choice to opt out puts many in danger of contracting COVID that could be severe or even fatal. I ask you all, does wearing a mask prove fatal to anyone? There is zero evidence that children in school settings are in danger from mask wearing, but thousands of data points exist proving that wearing masks in school settings decreases transmission risk. We've been told repeatedly that the layered mitigations will make schools safe for all children. Allowing opt-outs causes many high-risk and compromised families and disabled children to be left behind because they were denied a virtual option, even though that would have been the parents' choice for their children. Virtual VA is not a viable option for students like my son who have IEP.
30 seconds.
But more disturbing is hearing my son tell me that many students and staff aren't wearing masks correctly. My son has had to endure his baby sister being hospitalized several times for something as minor as a cough. So the importance of hand washing, social distancing, and most of all, masks gives him a sense of security that he's significantly less likely to bring COVID home. But now his concern decimates my trust that BBCPS can keep my family safe. IEP services must be provided. How will my son be educated when BBCPS...
And that is time. Our next speaker is Kat Evans. Please unmute.
Welcome.
Hi, good evening, Madam Chairwoman, Dr. Spence, and members of the board. I am a Virginia Beach City public school teacher as well as a Virginia Beach City public school parent. So I have a child in the schools. And I don't feel safe that my working conditions and that my daughter's learning conditions will be safe for the foreseeable future. So we are enclosed indoors with our classes for 7 hours. Students may go to other classes at times, but we are spending a significant amount of time indoors with our students. The student, my child, is spending this time enclosed in a room with people who are removing their mask, and that's putting her more at risk. Now, deciding that now is the time to allow students to unmask when distancing is a joke, what is the mitigations that we have, these layered mitigations? Hand washing, distancing when feasible, like how is that going to keep my daughter safe when people are unmasking and they can't move them and they're sitting right next to her? How is that going to keep my child safe in these schools? It's not. The majority of school districts in Virginia have voted to continue requiring masks. 52 districts so far, and that covers 76% of students enrolled in public schools in Virginia. If the school board's hands were tied due to the executive order, then why are the majority of school districts maintaining safety for their students? 7 districts, including one smaller than us and local, have filed a challenge to the executive order as violation of their authority. Why is Virginia Beach not included? 71% of Virginia parents support a mask mandate in schools, according to the polls taken at the beginning of the school year. When infection rates were lower, the virus spread 62% higher in those districts without mask rules. Apologizing to teachers and then putting them at risk with a harmful decision does not change what happened. I tell my students all the time, just because somebody apologizes, it doesn't erase the harm that was done. You do not have to accept their apology. Well, I certainly don't at this moment. Your decision puts my health and my child's health at risk. Virginia Beach Administrative Code 8 VAC 20 TAC 131 TAC 210 states that schools are required to provide a safe and secure environment in which to teach and learn. Given that the CDC and the American Academy
30
of
seconds.
Pediatrician and Virginia Beach Pediatrician
math class last week. Today he went to class and was surrounded by 4 unmasked kids. One of them started saying very loudly, "People that wear masks are stupid, that masks don't work," and encouraged all the kids in his class to remove their mask. The sub in the class did nothing about this disruptive behavior. My child felt unsafe and immediately called me to come get him. My son had COVID before vaccines and lost his sense of smell and taste for 6 months. My son knows that wearing masks work, and we all wore them when he had COVID and no one else in the family got sick. He does not want COVID ever again. My son stated last night, "I never thought having to go to school would potentially kill me, but here I am being forced into a situation that can leave me injured for life or kill me or a family member. I thought the governor said parents had a choice, Mom. Where is your choice? I would like to ask indeed, where is my choice to have my child in a safe environment?" We knew when we started the school year you were contact tracing and following a mask mandate. We knew that 6 feet of distance wasn't practicable, but that our family was comfortable with this due to the mask mandate. I listened to the workshop earlier and heard that you aren't contact tracing anyone but athletes. You can't get tests. You ordered K95 masks, but you don't have them yet. You aren't able to socially distance unmasked students in the classroom, and you don't have a barometer to tell when there's an outbreak in a class or a school. And from your own admission, state that you haven't gotten an update from the health department and anecdotally have decided the district is in moderate transmission. How can you, not a health professional, determine this without any contact tracing? Many of the recommendations for safety for our students and staff are not being followed, and one of the remaining layers of mitigation, masks, are now optional. When students return to the class after a 5-day quarantine, who is checking their mask status to guarantee they're wearing a mask for those 6 to 10 days? Will this be on the honor system? 2 anonymous teachers at middle school and high school asked me to share
30
that some
seconds.
of their students were taunting them by pulling down their masks, and even though there's no opt-out form for these children, they're not allowed to say anything. This is not respecting parent choice. I agree that we need metrics for on and off ramps with all the layered mitigation measures, including masking. I implore the board to reconsider their decision and vote to uphold SB 1303 by following the other school divisions around the Commonwealth to protect our students and staff by having a mask mandate until metrics show that removing masks in the school.
And that is time.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Kim Benzie. Please unmute.
Good evening.
Welcome.
I come to you as a mother of children within Bbcps with significant concerns for their safety, teachers, administrators, and the wider public. As Ms. Wright pointed out last week on Thursday, January 20th, there's something such as a broader community that we must incorporate into these decisions. See, there are not just 2 groups contrary to what many perceive. Yes, there are masked and unmasked individuals. However, there are also unvaccinated kiddos and those who cannot get vaccinations for good reasons. There are those who are immunocompromised, and there are those whose family members are. There are individuals who rely on school for their basic necessities, and then there are some children who need much more support, such as children with 5
Yes.
IEPs. So while we're sitting here trying to appease the unmasked by compromising all these students, teachers, administrators, and other family members are discounting due to your perception of being a rule follower. Regarding being a rule follower, let us learn a couple things while I'm at this. We're all lifelong learners, so our first topic of discussion is executive orders. While governors would love individuals who are not in the known to be kept that way, executive orders are not law. Executive orders, again, are not law, such as SB 1303 voted on by elected individuals who represent people. EO2 was not openly debated legislative piece, but passed by a bipartisan legislator. This was a newly elected governor who negligently decided to appease his voter base by sending an executive order to give them what they now perceive as free reign to do anything because of quote-unquote parent choice. The topic of discussion today is masks, but what does tomorrow bring? What is kind of a relief is the governor is now backtracking on his executive order, knowing his limits to power, and saying for school board members to wait for court determinations and for principals to follow their directives. While we're on rule following, let's learn about federal laws. As I pointed out a minute ago, various groups are protected by federal laws. So if you're not aware, these are IDEA, ABA, and Section 504. These laws protect students most vulnerable for multiple medical, mental, or educational concerns in which they are afforded a free and appropriate education in the least restrictive environment.
30 seconds.
Do you perceive the possibility of virtual school for these individuals being pushed out of school is considered least restrictive? Do you perceive these children, their case managers and teachers will be able to maximize on the accommodations and strategies for these children to meet their goals if they're virtual? Do you think the said compromise of mask of certain parents who opt out, which again is not a compromise, is the benefit for the most vulnerable population remaining in school where they thrive on these additional supports?
And that is time. Our next speaker is Melissa Peck. Please unmute.
Welcome.
Good evening. I'm a parent of 4 school-aged children. Our oldest 2 attend the Governor STEM Academy at Lansdowne, and one is also enrolled in the Environmental Studies program. My high schoolers request that you not support the proposed high school schedule change, Agenda Item 15B. As a family, we also wish to address masking. On its website, Bbcps lists its core values. The first core value is as follows. We put students first, student-centered decision-making, choosing actions that, above all else, benefit and support student learning, growth, and safety. We ask ourselves, how am I putting student interests and needs first when making decisions? With your vote at the last meeting, you failed to meet this core value. You have failed to put student needs first and have unquestionably failed to support student safety. Masks were the last remaining mitigation strategy being employed inside most Virginia Beach schools understand now be at an even greater risk for contracting COVID as a result of your negligent decision. We now have kids in school burdened by the increased risk of exposure to COVID present as a result of the removal of the mask mandate. Some of these kids have siblings at home too young to receive the vaccine or caregivers with high-risk factors. How does this unwelcome distraction, above all else, benefit and support student learning as your core value demands? Personally, I am disappointed that I have spent a lot of time supporting some of you previously when it is now clear that you do not respect the safety and well-being of my children while they are under the care of Bbcps. We do not want your apologies before you take a vote. Your apologies acknowledge that you have breached our trust in you, but they do not excuse your poor decision-making.
That's in reference to Kim Melnick from the 20th.
Your commitment to provide students and staff a safe learning and work environment. I'm glad to see so many doing so tonight. I strongly encourage you to reconsider the vote taken previously and to enforce a mask mandate once again in compliance with SB 1303 and to provide at least one consistent mitigation strategy.
30 seconds.
Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is Sarah Gerloff. Please unmute.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Please proceed.
Code of Virginia, Title 22.1, Chapter 6 states, the office of any division superintendent, whether full-time or part-time, shall be deemed vacant upon his engaging in any other business or employment during his term of office as such superintendent, unless such superintendent was granted prior approval by the school board or schools appointing him or upon his resignation or his removal from office. Aaron Spence has been listed as the agent of EduNavigate Leadership Consultants.
Ma'am, Miss Gerloff, this matter has been addressed previously.
It is my understanding that Spence was
Call
not
it a
given
personal
prior
attack.
approval from this
That this is a personal attack with no direct connection to, ma'am.
office of superintendent was deemed vacant when he actually first engaged in
Ma'am, I'm offering you one last opportunity to stop this personal attack that's disrupting the school board meeting.
But she didn't have the ability to that.
Please.
She owes $500,000 to the taxpayers.
I have to rule you out of order if you don't cease, please.
Okay,
Please go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Okay, our next speaker is Caitlin Lyles. Please unmute.
mother of two Virginia Beach elementary school students, and I felt compelled to speak tonight to express my extreme disappointment with the school board's vote to choose politics over the advice of qualified experts and to make masking optional. I believe it's important for you to know that the loudest group does not necessarily represent the majority of parents in this city. I will talk about why I believe this was the wrong decision, but first I think it's important to mention my disbelief that a few of you actually apologized prior to making your vote. It seems rather obvious to me that if you have to apologize for the way you're about to vote, then you absolutely know it's the wrong decision. We've been told throughout this school year that layered mitigation strategies would keep our children, teachers, and their families who aren't being given a choice in this matter, and about the impact to the greater community and our healthcare system. Of course, I realize my children can continue to wear masks. They're perfectly comfortable with doing that, and I truly wish it were that simple. But there's clear evidence that masks are significantly more effective if everyone's wearing them. If others, particularly those who are unvaccinated, are also unmasked, then my children and their teachers are not as protected. Replacing mask mandates with parental choice just doesn't make sense when that choice has an impact on the health and well-being of others. With that said, I do not want the children to be masked forever. I'm not exactly sure when I think masks should become optional, but I am 100% sure that now, in the midst of the largest wave of cases to date, when our city's transmission level is high and positivity rate is near 40%, is not the time. The Bbcps dashboard has recorded over 3,200 cases for the month of January so far. That's nearly 4 times what was reported for the entire school year last year, and it's 6 times what was reported for December. It will be difficult to know what the impact of this decision is, since contact tracing is no longer happening and tests are very hard to come by. Luckily, there are some indications that this wave has peaked, and I very much hope that trend continues. I just wish you could have been patient and waited for transmission to come down before you took away the most important mitigation we have. It was clear in the district-wide email with which announced this decision that this administration believes that universal masking is effective and that the CDC and American Academy of Pediatrics guidelines should be followed. Despite that fact, neither the administration or the school board
30 seconds.
shown by over 50 of the state's other districts, including many of our neighbors, who are keeping their mask policies in place pending the outcome of court proceedings. I would like to thank Ms. Holtz and Ms. Owens for standing up for what's right and making it clear that you care about the health of the teachers, children, and families of this city. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is Lawrence Reed. Please unmute.
Welcome.
Yes. I had an uncle who died from COVID-19 and a cousin in the hospital right now today. My daughter, who attends the Governor's Library, to anyone else's right to life, as the Declaration of Independence says. We hold these truths to be self-evident that we are entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These are listed in the order of their importance. Legally, it's a legal document, and it's the one that established the country. In other words, your rights, choices, and freedoms, your pursuit of happiness is secondary to everyone else's right to life. That's where your freedoms end, where another person's begins. It's come to my attention that one Glenn Youngkin has set forth his political party's desire to increase my children's exposure to COVID-19 virus. I fought 2 years to keep them away from it. With this, let it be known that his order is unlawful, as stated by Virginia Senate Bill 1303, which is a law now, and it was a law when he took office. It precludes all school districts, including Virginia Beach, any consideration outside of that which the CDC has determined prescribed. This law was in place when he took office. So Mr. Youngkin, by his very oath of office, is compelled to enforce Virginia state law, not to contradict it. If he is, it seems that he's representing something other than the Commonwealth. That he continues this is a further violation of his oath, a dereliction of his duty, and it shows criminal intent because he's violating the law. The Attorney General Miyares is not supposed to represent the governor's interests, nor is he supposed to champion any legal cause that is in contradiction to Virginia law. That he is doing this in concert with the governor makes this a conspiracy. In addition to his own violation of oath, dereliction of duty, and added criminal
30 seconds.
As for the school board, you are legally bound to follow what the law actually says. I hear a lot about negative feelings about wearing masks, but each one of us is a potential biohazard. Yeah, a child's negative feelings about masks is very small. Children who are dead can't do anything. Please note that not one person speaking against masks has had a child to die from wearing a mask.
And that is time.
Long-term illness.
Our next speaker is Lindsay Nathaniel. Please unmute.
Welcome.
Good evening, school board members and Dr. Spence. Governor Youngkin's recent executive order violates Senate Bill 1303 and oversteps his authority. But you already know this. Your recent vote put politics over the well-being of our community, children, and educators. I applaud the school boards across the state that are standing up and putting public health first. Meanwhile, you have catered to the least informed. While the majority of parents want their kids in a mask, parents and teachers deserve to know why, not to have multiple emails go unanswered. To say that I'm disappointed in a number of you who previously took this seriously is an understatement. You have thrown your hands up instead of looking out for students and staff while we have record high cases. I listened to the workshop, and let's be clear about something. The Virginia Department of Health is not what it once was. Removing masks as a preventative measure was updated to support the governor's agenda, not science. The current mitigation strategies are lacking. Teachers report not being able to keep 3 feet of distance in their classrooms. There's no contact trace happening. And even when more than half a class plus the teacher has COVID, the classroom is staying open. You can create clever hashtags like hashtag #VBSafeTogether with the S in safe standing for stay home if you're sick. Yet 2 board members clearly sounded sick at the previous special meeting and came anyway, apparently testing positive the following day. If leadership has given up caring about keeping others safe, what makes you think parents won't send sick kids in and just call it allergies? My family has done everything we can to keep my high-risk daughter safe, including doing virtual Virginia. But don't think for 1 second that I'm not angry that she can't return to in-person and experience high school the way everyone should be able to do because of your decisions. My child has rights too. She deserves better than this. Following the CDC guidance for mask wearing in our schools is the best way to keep faculty, staff, and students safe during in-person classroom instruction. We cannot acquiesce to elected officials who put the health and safety of our children at risk for political gain, including yourselves.
Our next speaker is Alison Verbanik. Please unmute.
Welcome.
Good evening. I will be reading for a teacher who wishes to remain anonymous for fear of retribution. I've been home for COVID with a week. It started suddenly after lunch. My throat was scratchy and then the headache hit like a freight train. Luckily, my school took it seriously and found someone to cover my class immediately, and I went home. I saw this coming. A third of my students have been absent every day since returning from break. My husband got it from me. However, my recently boosted daughter has not had any symptoms. I have the option to send her to school mask-free. Do you want to sit next to her in class? Do you want your child sitting next to her? Masks are the one layer of mitigation we have left to protect each other. This fight about masks is selfish. You have played into the hands of a small, loud, self-serving group of adults more concerned about mask acne and getting their face on the news than another parent's child spending days in the hospital hooked up to machines. Our schools are supposed to work for everyone. That is why they are public. Our district has given the message loud and clear that they most definitely do not work for the majority or are most vulnerable. I have been teaching for 18 years. I believe what I do is for the greater good of our community. I left a much higher paying career because guiding young adults to become successful, productive members of society was a nobler cause. I am a teacher of the year, have been tagged by the superintendent. I have made a difference. I love what I do. Now I'm looking for a new career, not even interested in sticking it out for the 20. I am not alone. Our admin and school board members have failed at every step we have made to make a difference, to come out stronger together. Instead, you have chosen to sacrifice the people that care about our children, literally sacrifice. 3 of my daughter's teachers have passed from COVID in the past 2 years. Wearing a mask is a simple way to take care of each other. It is a temporary inconvenience that might mean the difference between a normal life and a life of long-haul COVID effects. It is a public health issue. You have made it political. Option C was not a compromise. It was your arm being twisted by a bully. Every parent should be appalled by the direction we were given during faculty meetings on Monday about how to ignore the safety of our students and refer everyone to our principals. Let them take the heat, right? Downtown admin wants to pretend like we are living and operating under normal times. We are not, and you are making it worse. What I can see happening in my classroom, the experience of having COVID, trying to protect my family and students have been made exponentially more difficult because of the reckless decisions of this school board. You have let the entire school system down and will
30 seconds.
Masks aren't forever. They should be temporary while we work together through this. Please reconsider masking for all students. As a side note for me, as a parent, what kind of world do we live in when teaching selfishness is okay, but trying to protect the health of others is banned? As a parent, my children have every right to protect their bodies. I refuse to allow this division to force an illness onto them by forcing them to sit next to an unmasked student. Please reconsider masking for all. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Heidi Dragneff. Please unmute.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me the time to speak. I want to start out by reminding you that my children are not your data points. They are not part of your wait and see what happens experiment. We've already seen over and over again the results of this virus. I would like to say that I have medical experience in the medical field as well as my husband. I'm extremely disappointed in our school board's decisions on allowing anyone to go mask-free while we are having the biggest surge on record. It's wholly irresponsible to our babies and the rest of our community. Public schools are the foundation of our communities. They should set the example. If you're sending your child to school in an ill-fitting or dirty mask, that is on you as a parent to make sure you clean them and make sure they are properly fitting or replaced, just like underwear. I would also like to add that pneumonia is bacterial infection. It cannot be caused by cold air. It is caused by sick people being close to other sick people and transmitting it. And an executive order does not override the law. The governor's executive order is illegal. Last week, my daughter caught COVID at school. She's fully vaccinated. We don't go anywhere else. So the idea that there's not high transmission in schools is a lie. Just look at the numbers. We're only 3 weeks into January and we have over 3,500 cases already. The positivity rate has been sitting around 40%, and that doesn't include home tests. I have a child that has viral asthma and doesn't get over even mild colds without medical intervention. Is she just dispensable to you? I've been fully vaccinated and had a booster, and I should not be sick right now. The fact that I am is proof that the variants are getting stronger and more vaccine evasive. I'm at high risk for stroke, so am I dispensable to you? And yes, I do want the germ-infested kids to stay away from mine. Your lack of care does not mean you get to subject my child to a deadly illness. We are seeing some of the long-term effects already, even with being vaccinated. There have been perfectly healthy children that now have irreversible heart damage, blood clots, and lifelong breathing issues, among other things. We have done all the right things. We got vaccinated, we wear masks, we stayed home for the holidays, and saw no one. And because of this small fraction of people, we have variants that are becoming stronger than our vaccines. You are allowing a very
30 seconds.
of ill-informed people who travel around the state in a group to dictate our public health decisions. They have proven over and over again that they get their information from their political idols and skewed news outlets. Just because they are loud doesn't mean they are right. They have put our entire community at a much higher risk because of their selfishness and inability to consider others. They are working overtime to overwhelm us and bully us into backing down. They are being funded.
And that is time.
Thank you. Good night.
Our next speaker is Melissa Luksen. Please unmute.
Welcome.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, please
Okay,
proceed.
I have a new acronym for everybody. MMMA. Make masks mandatory again. Crazy how some people think if you get mild COVID, then you're fine. And if you got sick but you don't die, it's not that serious, like the flu. I will say this. You know what I think people are talking too much about? Death from COVID. Make no mistake, that is a very real risk and should not be ignored. Do you know what we're not talking about enough? The very real documented cases of COVID, related diseases or complications post-infection, regardless if you were symptomatic or had a mild or severe infection, as if death is the only marker.
There is a growing body of scientific evidence and very serious concerns from the medical community about the invisible and irreversible damage COVID-19 is doing to the body once infected. Read the studies showing COVID-19 attacks isolated heart cells, causing muscle tissue to look like someone took a food chopper to it. The loss of taste and smell, it's a common symptom in mild cases. It's a neurological symptom, which has medical scientists concerned about the impact on the brain in the future. Multisystem inflammatory syndrome in children is a condition where different body parts can be inflamed, including the heart, lungs, kidneys, brain, skin, eyes, and gastrointestinal organs. All organs that COVID-19 attacks indiscriminately. Many children with this illness have had COVID or were around someone with COVID. Today, all restaurants are non-smoking because of science. You can still find the rare few places that have a separate area for you to suck your cancer stick. Otherwise, you have to stand outside away from others with your stick of shame. Can you imagine the public reaction today if a child was sitting in one of those closed-in smoking rooms? I'm a non-smoker, but I grew up in a family where everyone smoked cigarettes. It was really acceptable to bring your children in smoke-filled restaurants. Our parents and grandparents never considered the long-term effects of secondhand smoke. Who cares about a little smoke in an enclosed room? They looked cool with that cigarette in their hand, filling the room with cancer-causing carcinogens. Did my parents and grandparents think about their reckless decision of smoking cigarettes in our homes and restaurants? Today, at 45 years old and a cancer survivor, I often wonder if their ignorance was the cause of my suffering later in life. My point in sharing all this is that there are millions of people
30 seconds.
who are healthy, like I thought I was until I was told I had cancer, by the way. I wasn't symptomatic. Thanks to science, testing, and modern medicine, I'm alive today. Several speakers that have been verbally assaulting the school board and admin for 18 months are considered medically obese or overweight. You might feel healthy, but at no time do you know exactly what's brewing in your body. Multiple layers of mitigation are critical when you have a surge like the one we're in with Omicron. Thank you. Have a good night.
And that is time. Our next speaker is Melinda Rogers. Please unmute.
Welcome. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. As you know, I'm a teacher with the division, and I wanted to speak to you tonight regarding the unintended consequences that have occurred due to the decision made on Thursday evening, whereby the division attempted to follow two opposing governing directives. First, I want to address the layered approach to COVID mitigations that are now in place. In my own classroom, I have an air purifying machine. I open my windows daily. I have provided at my own expense a box fan to move the air through the classroom, and we wash our hands. Last, I can keep students separated 3 to 6 feet apart. That's it. Those are all the layers. So, as you can see, none of these layers address how to effectively mitigate students who are closer than 3 feet distance. Per CDC guidelines, masked students could have shared experiences in the classroom that would bring them closer than 3 feet apart, providing that masked students were together for less than 15 minutes. Lifting masking has eliminated the following opportunities in the classroom for students. Younger students can no longer experience shared centers. When young students were cohorted and masked in the classroom, they were able to enjoy shared materials and experiences, playing together in the classroom at times less than 3 feet apart. That is no longer an option, as students must maintain 3 feet of distance without masks. In my classroom, shared centers were put away today, and individual boxes of materials were brought back out as last year. In other classrooms, partnered reading has had to end because students cannot sit together with a shared book and read to each other while maintaining 3 feet of distance. Partnered and group work with math exemplars had to be put on hold because teachers cannot give students shared materials and keep 3 feet of distance while working on an exemplar. Small groups had to be moved into the hallway today because there are too many students in some of the small groups to be able to safely keep them 3 feet apart at the teacher table. The only solution this teacher thought of was to take the groups into the hallway, which caused a definite distraction to the students. Other unintended consequences include the following. The division has attempted to keep teachers from being responsible for who is masked and who is not. However, this has caused nothing short of chaos in the elementary grade levels. Parents are signing the opt-out form for their students, but then students are coming in masked off the bus and keeping their mask on all day. Teachers can say nothing. Parents are also requesting that their child remain masked all day, but teachers are not allowed to remind or tell students to keep it on per their parents' wishes. Today was not about parent choice, it was student choice. And some of these students making these decisions
30 seconds.
are 4, 5, 6, and 7 years old. The sad thing is that every single staff member showed up today did so for the students. They came in prepared as they possibly could, even though the directives they were given were woefully inadequate to prepare them for the school day. Building staff and bus drivers made today a success. It's high time to start supporting your staff and bus drivers with your decisions. You're supposed to be oversight for the division and ensuring all options presented are fully vetted. We are tired of dealing with the consequences of the decisions that are made.
And that is time.
Staff will deal with the fallout. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Liz Winters. Please unmute.
Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you. Good evening. I am a former Bbcps PE teacher assistant. I carried this job title for 8 years and made the tough decision to leave the education field completely. I am sharing this on behalf of Monica Ulari, a single parent of a first grader and kindergartner in Virginia Beach schools, whose caregiving responsibilities prevent her participation tonight. Monica states, I have some serious concerns about the school board's recent decision to make masks optional. Practically, we're in a surge right now, and removing mitigation in a surge will result in more students and teachers exposed and needing to stay out of school. I've heard in recent meetings the importance of minimizing learning loss and ensuring schools remain sufficiently staffed to continue in-person learning. This policy, which increases quarantine time for all students, even those in masks, to 10 days, will absolutely result in learning loss and will undoubtedly have an impact on staffing. As a full-time working parent of 2 young kids, the past 2 virtual learning days have been incredibly challenging. It's very important to me that the schools stay open and safe for in-person learning. Additionally, I question its legality. While aligned with Governor Youngkin's executive order, it's a direct contradiction of state law SB 1303, which requires in-person learning be provided and CDC mitigation guidance followed. We cannot both mandate universal masking and allow people to choose not to do it. There are multiple challenges to the legality of the executive order in the courts now. This is also not partisan perspective. It has been challenged by members of both parties. Another concern is that mask optional policies have been ruled a violation of the ADA because efficacy of masks rely on use by all. Disabled and immunocompromised students experience disproportionate negative impact of such policies, which can prevent their continued access to in-person public education. As a personal aside, my son is disabled and is at high risk of complications should he contract COVID. His teacher is not allowed to share with me the classroom mix of what proportions are and are not masked. This isn't private information, and in fact, most non-disabled students can probably just tell their parents what the classroom mix is, but his communication skills are not there yet. I am certain I'm not the only parent of a disabled student in this position and unable to make an informed decision as I lack access to the information. And based on the information shared in the workshop today, it's highly concerning to hear that I will not even be informed of his own mask wearing or removal. I fully support parental and individual student rights. When an individual's decision impacts only that individual, absolutely that person should have the right to make their own choices. Unfortunately, public health is not an area that works that way. Similar to a stop sign that only works if everyone accepts the minor inconvenience to ensure the safety of all, masks only work when we all adhere to the policy. It is my position
30 seconds.
that universal masking be reinstated until such time as either A, the challenges to the executive order are resolved by the court, or B, CDC recommendations, which are based on far more data than the anecdotal experiences shared by many in these meetings, are updated to indicate it is no longer necessary. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Our next speaker is Chana O'Galvin. Please unmute.
Welcome.
Greetings. I am a parent of a 5th grader and 7th grader within the Virginia Beach City Public School System, and I wish to express my great disappointment in this leadership's decision to make masking optional in schools. The past 2 years have been one disruption after the other regarding COVID protocols, and mark my words, this is exactly what the governor's executive order 2 intends to do. In what world does a leader of its citizens defy a law that seeks to ensure the wellness and safety of students, educators, and staff during a global pandemic? Well, I'll tell you, a world in which politicians devise a cultural wedge issue out of universal masking to blame school board member bodies, just such as yourselves, for failing public school families with the express intent to ultimately defund them and replace them with vouchers for charter schools that often enrich political donors and puts the entire status of Virginia public education in jeopardy. We cannot acquiesce to elected officials who put the health and safety of our children at risk for political gain. The privilege of parent choice and rugged individualism abandons vulnerable immunocompromised communities to fend for themselves and does nothing to encourage the collective good of society. Both of my kids received numerous recognitions in school for Citizen of the Quarter or Citizen of the Year over the years, which is all based on exhibiting qualities such as responsibility, respect, compassion, kindness, courtesy, and moral courage.
I only wish you all had the same moral courage to protect all students and faculty equitably. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Sarah Clark. Please unmute.
Welcome.
This is from a mother of a Bbcps 5th grader. Governor Youngkin's executive order is an example of political pandering which has no basis in science. The mask mandate was dropped when nothing has changed from a COVID-19 standpoint. Numbers are higher than they have been in a while. We have received regular emails from Bbcps letting us know your multi-layered health prevention strategy was keeping kids safe. However, now schools are being forced to backtrack on that message. What message is this sending our children? My son learns science in your schools, but you are currently ignoring the advice of the CDC who recommends universal masking. Health and safety should never be political, but you are teaching students that it is. You claim to have a mask mandate and mask optional at the same time, but it's not possible since it's no longer enforceable. You cannot enforce a mandate if you are not allowed to ask children to put their masks on. My son has friends who are immunocompromised. There are parents who have children with health issues. Many of these parents are not able to pull their kids from school because they must work. My son is happy to wear a mask to protect his friends. I'm raising my son to be a good person. What message does this send to my child? That we don't listen to science, that politics matter more than the health and lives of children and families. That's from the mother of the 5th grade student. I would like to add my own disappointment on behalf of all of my friends who have high-risk loved ones. I watched them carefully weigh their children's academic and social well-being against the fact that contracting this virus could mean a major health crisis for their child or another loved one. They have a right to a safe environment for their children. They trusted you to protect that right when they chose to return to in-person instruction this year. Not one of them expected the board would vote to remove mitigations in the middle of the biggest surge of the pandemic. Many other school boards have made the choice to protect the vulnerable members of their communities. Not only am I saddened by this, I am worried for the future. I'm worried about whether this board will protect the right for students to learn accurate history, and whether this board will defend the right to an equitable education for all, and whether this board will stand up to those trying to dismantle public education. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Penny Krieger. Please unmute.
Welcome.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. For this mask mandate is very personal. My fear of losing my son supersedes my anger, so if you'll allow me to set the scene. You see, my journey to be a mom was a long and heart-wrenching one. It was truly the only title I was ever interested in holding. So at age 44, when my son was placed in my arms for the first time, God was entrusting me with this most special gift. From that moment on, it was my job to provide love and protection for him. Our son arrived in this world with RSV, for which most can be like a common cold with a recovery time of 1 to 2 weeks, but can be serious for an infant and lead to bronchiolitis and pneumonia. Most children have had RSV by the time they're 2. Our son spent the first week of his life in NICU. It was a window into what the next 4 years would be like. His episodes were so bad within the first 7 months that they would diagnose him with acute asthma. A simple cold for your child meant mine would spend overnight stays at CHKD or heart rate monitors and being pumped full of steroids that would cause his body to tremble and shake uncontrollably. I would lie there holding my child, watching the heart rate monitor, praying it would not reach a rate where nurses and doctors would come rushing in. My heart was breaking while his lungs were gasping for air. Because of his asthma, every year since the time he was 2 and started preschool, he had to wear a mask all day while in school. He never complained. To him, it became second nature, and there was no harm to him because he had to wear this mask. Fast forward to March 2020, a family that had a routine now in place to keep our son safe suddenly felt deflated. An only child who needs interaction with other children and the simplicity of being a kid was now being hidden inside his home for protection. He fell right back into all the stringent rules that were once in place and was told he needed to resume 3 of the medications we had once taken him off of for added protection. I share all of this with you not for pity, but for awareness. I completely understand that some may feel that being told to wear a mask may feel like an imposition on your rights, but I'm asking you to look from different standpoints. If you have children that are perfectly healthy, no underlying issue, or compromised immune systems, I am so incredibly happy for you, for I know all too well the toll it takes when your child is not completely healthy. There are no definitive reasons why this disease barely affects some and kills others. For this reason, using all resources to keep them safe should be utilized. To think otherwise is simply negligent. I close reiterating that this mask mandate is not only personal, but possibly life-changing for my family.
30 seconds.
With similar dynamics. My son was able to come back to school because of this mask mandate to enjoy being around his friends. He was able to feel like a part of something. These masks are a layer of protection to keep him safe. Because you see, one child may catch COVID and never even know it, but my son may catch it and die. Thank you.
So, Madam Clerk, before you proceed, we have 5 speakers left, so I'm just going to propose to my colleagues that we continue. Thank you. All right.
Our next speaker is Annie Palumbo. Please unmute.
Welcome.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, Ms. Palumbo, please proceed.
Interesting the fear that's going around. Out of 64,000 students, 22 speakers online all choose to stay home, scared, spewing fear. And you know what? I'm going to tell you something. At 17 years old, I had a child who died in my arms. So I know all about fear. You know, I'm 57 years old. I just got over my fear probably a few years ago. That was very traumatic for me as a high school student. And that's why I'm so passionate about these masks, is because I see nothing but fear. Fear that is going to follow these children the rest of their lives because you adults are spewing fear into your children. Please don't do this. Don't let these children live the rest of their lives being afraid of everything like I was. I'm usually there in person. The reason I'm not is because I'm going to the border tomorrow where kids are being trafficked right beneath our eyes and noses. And that's really abusive. And I can't believe we're here again arguing this. I'm trying to pack tonight, and when I find out we're here again and we have this meeting, I'm like, what in the world? There's some really big problems we have in this world. I just think it's interesting that we're here again.
Is one.
I wonder if the ones spewing the fear on this call, on this meeting tonight, are the same ones who sent me demonic calls and messages all last week. After listening to them, I'm like, yep, these are the people doing it. So you know what, you guys? It didn't bother me, but stop this. Life is scary enough. Goodness gracious, let these children have a childhood. Beverly, I think this is very interesting.
Hard to have a childhood if you're sick or dead.
Seriously, who's paying you off? We're going to get to the bottom of this. I guess you didn't think anything about being maskless 2 weeks ago at your son's wedding. We've got pictures. Hundreds of people at the wedding.
Oh my God, everything. They keep bringing this up.
Shame on you. So, last meeting, Jessica and Dottie, I don't know how you guys leave your house every day. I seriously don't. You guys are the biggest fear mongers yet. Dottie goes in thrift stores without her mask. So it's all BS. It's all political.
Do these people just follow Dottie Holtz all over the place?
Wouldn't take their masks off because it's the typical abuse survivor syndrome. They've been abused.
30 seconds.
They're afraid. They're like, I can't. They always ask, why didn't she leave her husband? Why, or her boyfriend, or whatever, or he, an abuse survivor? Because they are so programmed to know only that, and that is what you should be so proud of yourselves. That's what you're teaching these children, all of you adults. So you know what? I please stop this fear. Do not let this happen. We will fight you. I'm not going to stop. Ever.
And that is time.
Would that be considered a threat?
Susan Losberg, please unmute.
Welcome.
Yes, good evening. I have lived in Virginia Beach for 20 years and have 2 children who have gone through the Virginia Beach public school system from kindergarten through 12th grade. My husband also went through 12 years in the school system. I get it. My younger daughter was a senior in high school when the pandemic started. She never had prom or an 18th birthday celebration with her friends or a real graduation to celebrate her IB degree. She accepted all that because we told her that if she followed the rules and wore her mask and socially distanced with her friends, this pandemic would go away and she could start college in the fall without masking and without social distancing. Well, she did her part, but not everyone followed the rules, and this pandemic has gone on much longer than it should have. So I don't have a child in the Bbcps school system any longer, and some may say this isn't my business. but I am still a member of this community, and the reckless spread of COVID affects me. After the decision that was made by the school board last week, I felt I had no choice but to speak out. Tonight, I am not going to speak to the data supporting the effectiveness of mask wearing or the present CDC recommendations regarding the mask wearing for our kids, or how this school board is putting our teachers, our school staff, our kids, and our families at home at risk, or why they should do so. And they would do so as we are having a surge in COVID cases, because so many have spoken to that. And this school board body knows the data and the danger, and we know that you do. I'm here to talk about how this decision you made to opt out from the masking requirement will affect kids emotionally. My daughter was bullied in middle school to the point where we had to make sure every year that the child who was bullying her was not in any of her classes. And we did that all the way through high school. It affected my daughter's self-esteem and led to other medical issues I won't go into tonight. But one of the results of being bullied is often the child does not want to cause waves or to stick out. There will be scenarios such where parents will decide that their kid will not be wearing masks any longer, and maybe their kid is anxious about that decision but doesn't want to upset their parents. Or a parent says her child must wear a mask, and that child's friends don't wear masks any longer, and she is stressed by that. Or she may be bullied or kept from engaging in certain social events with her friends. Anyone who has had a kid in middle school knows how tender that age is and the social pressure that they are under. I cannot for the life of me comprehend why you would support an optional mask wearing policy at this time. Aside from the very real the health danger that this will cause,
30 seconds.
Distress within the family and much added distress for kids at school. There are countless news articles from across the country discussing strategy for how to deal with bullying in mass optional school districts. Appearances are one of the most common reasons students report being bullied over. As a result, students could be bullied for either wearing or not wearing a mask depending on the region, because they may not be making a choice that makes them look different. In districts that don't require masks, families are left with a difficult choice for their children. Either make them...
And that is time.
Thank you.
Our next,
order. She needs to be called out of order for the moment.
She's leaving. She left.
she left.
The next speaker, please.
Next speaker, 24, is a duplicate. So our next speaker is Allison Daly. Please unmute.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. I have to say, the selfishness displayed by some of tonight's speakers is appalling to me. The callousness of some of them is discouraging and outrageous. So much for our hashtag #VBSafeTogether, which says face coverings are a must. The form I had to use to sign up to speak tonight includes the words, all persons in school board buildings will be required to wear face masks. What I've been trying to understand is why the school board and people in attendance in person at the meetings should have more protections than my child who attends school in person does. Why should
Good point.
be lessened when in-person learning? I have done everything in my power, including wearing N95, KN95 masks, double masking, hand sanitizer readily available at all times, social distancing, limiting trips out. I kept my kid home until he had to go back, until the option for him to school virtually was removed without a reasonable replacement. I fail to see how wearing a mask, such a small thing to keep my child safe, is just too much to ask. Is it because the other people are so loud that you capitulated? Parents who are angry at mask wearing to keep others safe are not the people to be bowing to. I mean, I understand that COVID is an ever-changing problem, and when our numbers are so high, probability of transmission increases exponentially. But the metrics we once followed have been disregarded while variants are running amok. Make it make sense. And while I've heard so many times that it's milder for children, no one knows the long-term effects that our future leaders will bear. We just don't have the information to make qualified guesses, and we shouldn't have to. Wearing a mask is not too much to ask, period. Thank you.
Our next speaker is William Norman. Please unmute.
Welcome.
William Norman, please unmute.
All right, let's go ahead.
We'll move on to our, Peter Alaya, please unmute.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. I guess the worst part about going last is getting to hear everything that comes before you. So, needless to say, I've thrown away what I was going to say, and I've had to make a lot of changes because I've heard a lot of passion on both sides. You know, I heard a lot of frustration, anger, conflict, and almost hatred, I feel. But in the same breath, I also heard a lot of love, compassion, and care. You know, we heard the public. This is the public. This is our community. They're all very passionate people, no matter where they fall, whether, you know, they're worried about the health and well-being of all the students, or they're worried about what they feel might be their own freedoms. They're very passionate. But one thing I do agree with is that I think all of them do truly believe that they are putting the kids first. One thing that I also think everybody agreed on was the non-transparency of what's going on here. You know, a lot of us felt like we knew what the board members were going to vote on. We knew what they were going to do because of what they had said in the past, and then they didn't. And, you know, I got to say, just like a lot of other people, and on both sides, I was incredibly surprised, and I even felt betrayed. I got to say, just like a lot of other people, and on both sides, I was incredibly surprised, and I even felt betrayed. And it's important that we, come together and discuss it. But I digress. I heard a lot of people talking about the fact that even teachers were perpetuating this fear, but that at other turns that teachers and admin and things like that, people like that were being tyrants. Like, which one are we? Are we cowards or are we tyrants? I don't get it. But I also heard a lot of horribly mean and, mean-spirited words like segregation and bullying going on just because we're trying, we're left holding the bag, as they say, again, and what are we supposed to do? Turn to our admin and put everything on them? What are we supposed to do? Make sure that bus drivers can watch every single thing that every single student is doing all the time? We can't. But what we can do is come out as a school board. This is what you should do, is come out and encourage people to stop attacking us. It's not teachers making these calls. It's not bus drivers. It's not our administrators. It's you guys, all right? And you made a big mistake this time, okay? And now you're backpedaling a little bit, and I get it. That's tough. I don't want to be in your position right now. What do you do? Dangle
30 seconds.
Take it away? Or do you do the right thing? I feel for you. But, I think you know what to do. You know the right thing to do. So let's wait for these numbers to get back down. Let's do the right thing for everybody for right now. It's not that big a deal. Kick it down the road a couple of weeks and let's reassess. Thank you. I appreciate it. God bless everybody.
Madam Chair, that was our last speaker for tonight.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So the information portion of our agenda this evening begins with interim financial statements for November, December.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Chairwoman Rye, Vice Chairwoman Melnick, school board members, Dr. Spence. In your board packets this evening are the November and December 2021 interim financial statements. I will keep this presentation focused on the financial position as of December 31st, 2021. The first graph shows that the overall revenue trend year to date through December remains acceptable. We received the governor's proposed amendments for the fiscal year 22 direct aid budget on December 16th, 2021. Among the key recommendations in the governor's amendments impacting the school division include an increase in sales tax estimated of approximately $10 million, but is offset by a decrease in basic aid of $7 million. There is also a reduction of $5 million in special ed regional tuition due to a change made by the state in the program to provide more funding to other school districts. There were also other minor technical adjustments in various SOQ, incentive, categorical, and lottery funded programs. Based on the governor's proposed amendments and a projection of the March 31st ADM, We are currently projecting a deficit of state revenue of approximately $5 million. As you know, the General Assembly can amend the governor's proposed budget. These are projections, and at the conclusion of the General Assembly session, VDOE will provide updated projected payments based on the final General Assembly's actions. Federal revenues are showing an acceptable trend at this time. We have received impact aid payments of approximately $10 million through the end of December. Other sources of revenue through the month of December are back in line where they were 2 years ago with schools being open. The next graph shows that the sales tax receipts are at an acceptable level. Year to date through December, we are approximately $4 million higher than the same time last year. And the last graph shows the expenditures and encumbrances trend continues to remain acceptable at this point in the fiscal year. At this time, this concludes my presentation, and I'll take any questions.
Colleagues? Okay, it looks like we're set for tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now information item B. This comes out of the Audit Committee, the Annual Comprehensive Finance Report. Back again.
Yes. Good evening, Chairwoman Rye, Vice Chairman Melnick, school board members, Dr. Spence. Our external auditors are here tonight to present the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. So we have Cherry Beckard with us. We have Laura Harden and Luke Reynolds to present.
Thank you. And you all have this nice thick spiral notebook at your seats. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you so much for having us here tonight to present the report of the June 30, 2021 audited financial statements for the City of Virginia Beach School Board. So just a little bit about our audit. It's a very lengthy, time-consuming process that spans from the summer all the way to December. There are a few key parts of this audit. The first is the financial audit, where we are testing the significant balances in transactions that are making up that big book that you'll have that is the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. As a part of that, we also test underlying assumptions of significant estimates, those things like depreciation expense, actuarially computed liabilities like your pension and OPEB, because those amounts are based on judgments and can be subject to change based on the underlying assumptions that make those up. We also gain an understanding of the internal control environment. We do that to help us to properly plan our audit and perform the testing. In addition, we're also doing what's called a compliance audit, where we test compliance with the Virginia laws and regulations. Those are the Virginia Auditor of Public Accounts specifications for counties, cities, and towns, as well as government auditing standards, and then doing the federal single audit, testing compliance with those federal monies. In the ACFR, there are a couple of unaudited sections. Those are the introductory section, required supplementary information, as well as the statistical section. And those are things where we're just providing an in relation to opinion. So we are comparing the amounts reported in those schedules to the balances that have been audited in the basic financial statements. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Luke to go over the results of the audit.
Hello.
Good evening. Just to go over the results of the audit, we have several opinions. The first opinion is on the financial statements, the financial audit opinion. Pleased to report a unmodified opinion, which is also called a clean opinion. That's the best opinion you can get. Next, we have the compliance audits. We issued an unmodified opinion there. We also had no material weaknesses in internal control to report, and in other matters of non-compliance with laws and regulations. Under government auditing standards, we had no noncompliance matters to report. Under the specifications for audits of counties, cities, and towns, we also had no issues of noncompliance to report. Additional communications I'm going to provide tonight. Regarding accounting standards and policies, there were no changes in the accounting policies of the school board. There was one new accounting standard adopted, GASB 84, fiduciary activities. In conducting the audit, there were no difficulties in conducting our audit. There were no disagreements with management. We had no corrected misstatements, and we had no uncorrected misstatements. In addition, we're not aware of any consultations with other accountants. And other matters to communicate, we are independent of the school board, and we did provide the management representation letter that was signed and provided back to us before the issuance of the statements. And that is it. If you have questions for Laura and I.
Let me first comment on the audit committee. Two of our members are up here on the dais this evening. Mrs. Franklin to my left, Mrs. Owens to my right, Miss Owens to my right, and Mrs. Melnick, the committee chair, is participating online. So I'd like to first offer the opportunity for committee members if they care to comment or.
Thank you. This is the second time Ms. Franklin and Ms. Melnick and I am getting to hear this audit report. And ultimately, what we shared in our audit committee and want to make sure that we're sharing now with the public and with the staff is that we were incredibly impressed with the work that our staff has done, with the amount of budget that they're required to follow and to ensure that things are going where they're supposed to be going and that the procedures are in place properly, to have the amount of transactions that we deal with and to have an audit come through objectively this clean is quite a feat. And while there's often questions from the public about how funding is being used and how funds are being accounted for, this gives me and hopefully the public real reassurance that there are checks and balances in place and that our third-party audits are coming out above average. They're coming out excellent. And so I'm very pleased with it. Our audit committee was very pleased with it. And we thank you for the extensive work that went into this audit.
Thank you.
I would
Mrs.
just
Franklin.
echo Ms. Owens' comments. I'm actually not surprised that our audit came out this clean because Terry and her team do an amazing job. I am constantly impressed with the work that she does and her team does, and every single audit meeting that I've ever attended has just been overwhelmingly impressive in terms of the minutia that they have to sort through and the way that they, the way that they handle their positions. So I'm glad that you could attest to the fact that they're doing a great job here, and thank you for all your work.
I can share.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify and just make sure that we were giving the due kudos. Obviously, we always love Terry and the audit committee, but to Crystal Pate and the finance group
Yes.
that were
Thank you.
Doing that.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Owens.
You're
And
welcome, Kim.
I echo your sentiments. I could not have said it better myself.
Is that it, Mrs. Melnick?
It is. Yes.
It is. And the only thing I can recall adding, because I did sit in on the last committee meeting, was that I think we do want to recognize our staff too, where you went out of your way to acknowledge their full cooperation, because you mentioned it was quite over the course of many months, and you know, this was the reopening of school and with a pandemic and with all that our staff still understood their role and responsibility in fully cooperating with all of you. So,
And I want to publicly apologize to Crystal and her team as well. Because there's always going to be someone that you forget to acknowledge, but everyone here does a great job.
Dr. Spence, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just, yes, in another incredible comprehensive audit.
report, and one that is consistent with the reports that I think most people on this board have seen throughout their time on the board, at least certainly extending all the way back through my administration, and I know prior to that, which is one of the reasons that our finance team is consistently recognized across the country nationally as an outstanding finance team that consistently receives awards for these audits and for their budget. And I would be remiss if I didn't kind of harken back to our former CFO, Farrell Hanziker, and remind you there's a lot of really good information in that CAFR, and hopefully you will be able to take the time as board members to read through that. It really does give you a great sense of how our budget operates.
All right, then, we thank you all for being with us this evening, and we will give this more attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Now we have Mrs. Linetti here to present Policy Review Committee recommendations.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, School Board members, and Dr. Spence. I'm Cami Linetti, School Board Legal Counsel, and on behalf of the Policy Review Committee, I'll be presenting tonight's recommendations. Tonight you will be getting 3 recommendations having to do with policies in Section 3. Section 3 is our business section, deals a lot with our finance and our business activities. The good thing about all these recommendations is they are basically minor adjustments. There are nothing significant in this area. Starting with Policy 311, Budget, we are asking that you amend this title to be Budget End of Year Unspent Unencumbered Funds. We had a fairly long discussion in Policy Review Committee about how we use our end of year funds. As you can see, this particular policy has not been amended since 1997. So again, it was time to look at it. And one of the areas that we noticed was under Section A, when we're talking about unencumbered funds at the end of the year, one of the things we talk about a lot is what we're going to use this money for and one of the areas we decided we wanted to add was Section 6, you'll see there. So renumbered sections, Item 5 is now to provide supplemental funding for this special reserve fund. 6 will now read to reduce future debt service costs. It is a practice you followed. We just wanted to make sure we're memorializing it here in this policy. We're going to recommend that you take out Section B, and that would be the end of the recommendations for Policy 311. Are there any questions about this policy? Hearing no questions, I'll move on to Policy 334. Policy 334, direct appropriation of funds for individual schools. There is a minor Scrivener change in the second paragraph where we're taking out the terms his and her, and we're just making a designation. Other than that, there are no other recommendations for this policy. Are there any questions about Policy 334? Hearing no questions about Policy 334, I will move on to Policy 343. Fiscal responsibility of school administrators for individual accounts. Again, minor Scrivener changes. We're adding the word school in front of school board, a couple times in school administrators. No other changes are recommended. Again, I will note that this policy has not been updated since 1997, but after reviewing it, we determined there are minor changes needed. Are there any questions about Policy 343? Hearing no questions about Policy 343, we'll move on to Policy 345, inventories. The only thing we're recommending here is just changing the grammar. It will now read to account for all school property and its current location. The superintendent designee will use the inventory system developed. And then in the second paragraph, we are adding into the inventory shall include, but not be limited to, such items as buildings, movable equipment. We added technology equipment as that is significant for us at this time. Again, a policy that has been on since 1993 needed to be amended, so we've updated that policy to include the technology equipment. Are there any questions about Policy 345? Hearing no questions about Policy 345, I'll move on to Policy 357. This policy had a few more changes, but they are really not significant. They're just updating to current terminology that we are using. This policy is Safety Hazard Communication Program. We've done a little minor change, Scrivener changes. In Section A, we're pulling out the subcategories of where you would find policy manuals because obviously this information is now online. And so in the second paragraph, it'll read, the written program will be available to the public in electronic form upon request. And we're pulling out all the locations where you would have been able to go to see a hard copy before. Section B is really including renumbering. This is a section that did actually have the current formatting numbering that we use in policies. So you'll see updated throughout the following section that we've added numbers and subsections to them. The other significant change will come in what is now going to be paragraph 2 under the second paragraph, second page, it used to be called material safety data sheets. And MSDs used to see there's now the current change that law has changed, and the terminology is now safety data sheets. So you'll see some minor changes reflecting the current terminology for that. Throughout the rest of the paragraph, you're going to see just changes to formatting to make sure it's consistent and to how we currently use it. Under 5 and 6, you'll see some changes adding chemicals and unlabeled pipes. Again, going all the way down to the end, we pulled out the editor's note to be consistent with how we currently format our policies, and there's some changes in the law to recommend the current wording. Again, this policy had not been looked at since 1993, so most of our changes to update just to the current law and the current terminology. Are there any questions about this policy? Moving on from policy, we looked at policy 358, safety hazard waste, containment disposal. Again, the same thing we look at. We are actually just changing again some of the names of the departments. If you look down section B, we're referring to as the Office of Maintenance instead of Office of Maintenance Plant Services instead of School Plant. Office of Maintenance Services instead of School Plant Services. The changes, you'll see that change throughout the policy. There are a few other changes involving editor's notes and an update on some of the current law and titles for that law. Again, this policy had been looked at in 2014, but we updated the law to reflect the current stage. Are there any other questions about policy 358? Hearing no questions about policy 358, I will move on to policy 359. Again, primarily Scrivener's changes. This is safety under asbestos abatement. You'll see we've gone ahead and added in or designee after the superintendent. In the first paragraph on there, you'll see again a reference to the division's Office of Maintenance Services instead of School Plant Services, and you'll see some updating to the legal references again to reflect the current status of the law. This policy was last looked at in 2014, and we needed to update that law and updated newer law that had been added that was not included in the last version of the policy. Are there any questions about policy 359? Hearing no questions about policy 359, we'll move on to policy 366, environmental barriers, accessibility. In this particular policy, we're updating some Scrivener changes in section A. We are going to remove section B because that appears in another policy. We are going to renumber B, what is currently section C to B. B now is new construction. And we've updated some of the editorial changes on it and minor changes to the filling out the citation for some of the laws that appear after that. We've added the reference to the ADA Accessibility Plan in 2010. Then this policy was last looked at in 1993, and we've updated it for the current law. Are there any questions about policy 366? Hearing no questions about policy 366, we're going to look at policy 367. This is environmentally sustainable practices. The only change you're going to see here will be in C9. We are pulled out the last couple words of that. It will now read specify as a minimum 30% recycled content paper in lieu of standard office paper for all purchases, and we'll be recommending to pull out the rest of that sentence on there. Again, this policy was looked at in 2014, so it does not have as many changes as you saw in some of the other policies. Are there any questions about policy 367? Those are the end of the recommendations on the information agenda this month from the Policy Review Committee.
Thank you. We'll expect to see these next meeting for consent. So speaking of consent, we have 2 resolutions tonight, so we'll go ahead and have each of these read and then take motions. And Career and Tech Ed, I believe, is Mrs. Franklin.
Resolution for Career and Technical Education Month for February 2022. Whereas profound economic and technological changes globally have a direct impact on the structure and nature of work, thereby placing new and additional responsibilities on our educational system. And whereas career and technical education, which provides students with a career pathway for post-secondary education and workplace readiness, is the foundation of a strong, well-educated workforce, which fosters productivity and innovation in business and industry and contributes to Virginia's leadership in the international marketplace. And whereas career and technical education gives students experience in practical, meaningful application of basic skills such as reading, writing, and mathematics, thus improving the quality of their education, motivating all students to achieve at high levels, and giving all students leadership opportunities in their communities. And whereas career and technical education offers individuals lifelong opportunities to learn new skills that provide them with career choices, expanded earning potential, and job satisfaction. And whereas the ever-increasing cooperative efforts between career and technical educators, career and technical education administrators, and business and industry representatives stimulate the growth and vitality of our Commonwealth's economy by preparing students for careers in high demand, high wage, and highly technological skilled work in a global economy. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the school board of their city of Virginia Beach officially recognize the month of February 2022 as Career and Technical Education Month in Virginia Beach City Public Schools, and be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be spread across the official minutes of this board. Adopted on this 25th day of January 2022.
Thank you, Mrs. Franklin. Now on to School Counseling Week. Mrs. Hughes.
Whereas the Virginia Beach City Public Schools school counselors are employed to help students reach their full potential, and whereas Virginia Beach City Public Schools school counselors are actively committed to helping students explore their abilities, strengths, interests, and talents as these traits relate to career awareness and development, and whereas Virginia Beach City Public Schools school counselors help parents focus on ways to further the educational, personal, and social growth of their children, and whereas Virginia Beach City Public Schools school counselors work with teachers and other educators to help students explore their potential and set realistic goals for themselves, and whereas Virginia Beach City Public Schools school counselors seek to identify and utilize community resources that can enhance and complement comprehensive school counseling programs and help students become productive members of society, and whereas school counselors are a vital part of recovery efforts as they have adapted their programs to meet community and student and community needs in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and whereas school counselors act as advocates for educational equity, they empower all students, close achievement gaps, and address systemic barriers, and whereas comprehensive developmental school counseling programs are considered an integral part of the educational process that enables all students to achieve success in school and life, now therefore be it resolved that the school board of the city of Virginia Beach recognize the first full week of February 2022 as National School Counseling Week in the Virginia Beach City Public Schools, and be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be spread across the official minutes of the board.
Thank you, Mrs. Hughes. Okay, motion to approve these two resolutions. Mrs. Riggs, and a second. Ms. Owens. Okay, all in favor, please show a raised hand.
Ms. Melnick, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Felton, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have a unanimous vote, and it did pass.
Thank you. Now on to action. Personnel report administrative appointments, part of our agenda packet. Motion to approve. Mrs. Anderson, and a second, Mrs. Weems. Any questions or discussion? Okay, then please show your approval with a raised hand.
Ms. Melnick, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Felton, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have unanimous vote. The motion did pass.
Dr. Spence, you have something to share. Yes? Okay.
I do, Madam Chair. Thank you so much. I'd like to recognize Brian Leininger. Mr. Leininger has been a teacher in South Carolina. He has been an administrative assistant in South Carolina. Most recently has been serving as a teacher at Kempsville High School. And we're pleased this evening that you've accepted our recommendation for him to serve as the next assistant principal at Lansdowne Middle School. So congratulations to Mr. Leininger.
Thank you. And yes, we all echo that. All right,
some of the concerns that were raised tonight, is it at all possible to have any of the exams for the 4x4 classes taken at the end of each semester?
Yeah, so I think I should probably clarify a couple of the comments that were made around testing and AP classes and academic support blocks or study blocks, as I shared those during the presentation 2 weeks ago. All AP classes will be on an AB schedule, so they will not be on a 4x4.
Everyone, because I think that we had discussed.
I gave an example of
Yeah.
an advanced calculus class in
Yeah.
some instances where a student might find benefit on a 4x4, but the vast majority are on the AB. And when I say vast, all but that calculus course is a potential option.
Okay.
Study blocks are still going to be provided for students. And then to your question about 4x4 and testing, those classes on a 4x4 schedule that are on a SOL testing would test in January at the end of that course. It's an end of course test. So those students would not wait till May to take an end of the course SOL test.
Oh, good. Okay. All right. And then, if I may, the Canvas platform that was discussed, when is that actually not going to be implemented till, I know we have a group that has already started using Canvas, but for the majority of the rest of the staff and faculty, when is that actually going to be put into effect? Because everybody that we heard from that has been part of that starting group has really provided great feedback about how great, and easy it was to transition. We've heard some concerns about the transition
Mrs.
time.
Franklin, excuse me, that was teachers, this is high school scheduling. You're asking a question. I'm asking, is it related to the high school scheduling?
I think it was related to the comment that we heard tonight about an additional initiative on top of the other.
On top of the high school scheduling, and how it's just going to be another layer of difficulty to implement.
Okay, thanks for providing that context.
So with that concern being approached tonight, what is the time frame that we're going to be putting Canvas in place, and are we going to be giving additional prep time to create that transition, along with them having to have the new high school scheduling? And I just want to make sure that we are addressing that teacher's concern.
Yes, and I'm not the expert on Canvas, so I'm going to have to defer to Dr. Rogers, whose instructional technology team works on the Canvas implementation.
So good evening, Chairman Y, Chairwoman Rye, school board members, Dr. Spence, Mrs. Franklin, to answer your question relative to Canvas. We have taken a step back with the Canvas implementation just because of all the things that we've been working with our teachers with. So we are taking a look at our timeline. Our team still continues to work on transitioning some of the resources from Schoology to Canvas, and we are still working through those processes, and we will certainly collaborate with DASL as well as our coordinators and school teams who started in the process to reevaluate the timeline with which we choose to move forward.
Okay, well, good. And I think that is exactly why we love to hear, though, from teachers and staff, because, again, I think that was a valid question about the layered impact of having to address both of those things happening at once. So I appreciate the question and the response. Thank you.
Mrs. Hughes, then Mrs. Manning.
So we've gotten feedback from students both for and against 4x4, but as I understood it at the presentation at the last meeting, it's going to be hybrid because some are best delivered one way and some another way. If we could just, the communications we're getting don't seem to reflect that people realize that they're going to have an option for both. If we could just kind of
I appreciate the question, because it's interesting how often I've heard we're going to a 4x4 schedule, no matter how often we've said we're not going to a 4x4 schedule. I think when you look at the presentation, you would see the opportunities that we listed that we're going to be on an AB block schedule, such as many of our student with disabilities courses, NGROTC, band, some orchestra courses, probably AVID courses. I'm missing some in that list, but there's a comprehensive list that we said would be on the AB. And if you think about a student schedule, that means the majority of our students are going to have at least 1 or 2 courses on an AB schedule. Many of our core content areas are going to be on the 4x4 schedule. We talked about that in the last meeting. Thomas Coker also came up and presented that we were going to have everyday math for algebra and geometry for those students that are in need of that algebra and geometry support. So the answer to your question, Ms. Hughes, it is a hybrid schedule. And I think you will find several students, such as the student that talked about 5 AP classes, will be predominantly on an AB schedule, because those classes are going to be on the AB schedule so that those students are prepared for those end of course exams in May, usually May when they occur for AP. So you will see examples when this plays out of kids that may be in predominantly 4x4 that go to the tech center. You may have some students with disabilities that have a 4x4 class, but also have AB classes. I would say the vast majority are going to have a hybrid schedule. I did provide an example of a schedule of a student that did have predominantly 4x4 that was going to the tech center as well. We saw that as advantageous because it allowed them to focus on 2 classes as well as go to the tech center. Also allowed them to pick up and still be a part of some advanced coursework as well.
So I thought the presentation we had at the last meeting was pretty comprehensive, and there were a lot of visuals. Is there, if that hasn't already been done, and maybe it has, is there any way to put a link to that on the website and maybe direct some of our high school students, or ones that are going to be high school students next year, to it, so they can kind of have a comprehensive overview? Because that might alleviate some of the worry as well.
Yes, and I also provided that copy to all the high school principals and said, please use at your leisure. We used a lot of those examples on the webinar that we did last week. I think there's about 450 attendants at that webinar. I'd be glad to find a way to put that link there as well. I think it can become confusing for folks that don't hear the context behind what that is. So for example, many people, when they watched the presentation, saw the schedule and said, are we only offering AP classes in blocks 3 and 4? Yeah. So you try to provide those samples, and then people get very literal in what they're looking at. I think the most important thing that, as Mr. Jamison said when he was here last time, is they're going to meet with their students and send that information home to families. Families will engage with their school counselors, really be informed on what those decisions look like. And I think that's where the greatest value really comes apart, is that one-to-one conversation with the school counselor. But I certainly don't have a problem with doing that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, go ahead, Mrs. Mann.
Yeah, I have some similar questions. I was going to ask the same question regarding the Schoology to Canvas concern. So thank you, Dr. Rogers, for addressing that concern. And I'm still hearing, this is a messaging thing, and I brought this up at the last meeting. I'm still hearing, students saying, we're not going to get a study block next year. We heard it tonight. The message is out there because they're being told to choose 8 classes, and it hasn't been explained to them that they still get a study block. Can we please get a message out to families, maybe just bullet points? This is, AP classes are going to be predominantly on an AB schedule. They will get a study block. I mean, I really feel like the message needs to get out.
I'd certainly believe we can do that for sure. I don't see any concern if the board approves the schedule to say, hey, as this was approved, here's some things we want to highlight that we've heard as concerns. I don't think there's any problem with that. As I was listening to the young lady speak tonight, I'm like, well, she needs to be I need to get her principal in contact with her and sit down and really walk her through. And that's already happened, where I reached out and said, will you please reach out to this young lady tomorrow?
Yeah, and I got a lot of great feedback from people that attended that webinar, but a lot of people don't have time to put a webinar on their schedule. They can just get an email with some bullet points to just ease their concerns.
Yeah, that should not be a problem
at all.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
We can do that, and I'll also, I'm sorry, we can do that, and I'll also just note the webinar is on our website, so we can also make sure we send people to it. We recorded it and they can watch it at their own time.
Madam Chair, both Ms. Melnick and Ms. Felton have their hand raised to be put in the queue.
Okay, go ahead, Mrs. Anderson.
So I won't keep you, because I just wanted to reiterate what Mrs. Manning said. I agree, we need to get the message out. That student that was here tonight was definitely a little misinformed about the AP classes. And we were told specifically that those types of classes would be on the AB schedule, so that would be beneficial to get the word out a little bit more clear to people so that they understand that. Thank you.
Yes. And if I could just ask you to reinforce again, you said core algebra and core geometry are also AB?
Mr. Coker called it everyday math for algebra and geometry. We will also be offering honors algebra, honors geometry that would be on a 4x4 schedule. If you recall his conversation around the ability to accelerate math for those students that are prepared for that.
Sure, that
one of
have
the
the
real
aptitude.
benefits of the 4x4 schedule for those students that can still, even if they start later in algebra, still get to calculus if that's the direction they want to go. And I think that just reinforces our desire to just maximize opportunities for students in a schedule that previously has really inhibited that ability to do so.
Right, and I'll just echo the previous 2 speakers on the communication piece. So it's just very frustrating to have a student at the podium who's so misinformed. I won't say any more about it. Okay, Mrs. Melnick.
Thank you. Will courses be the same for every school in the division to ensure equity for students who transfer between schools?
Yes, that's part of the process of that committee that Ms. Turnbull-Pallett, who was here and spoke from Salem High School, we're really making sure that they just align so that transfer can happen. That assures that we have the 4x4 capabilities and the AB components. And the example I'll give to you, and I think I shared this in November, which was a telling point around the need at times to move to this schedule. We had a student at the Renaissance Academy who's on Dr. Spence's advisory committee that wanted to return back to her home school, but she said, I'm on a 4x4 to graduate and I don't want to go lose that opportunity. That this would provide that opportunity for the student to go back and still have that schedule to do so. So it's a major component of our planning. Now, clearly, in some instances, there's classes that are offered at some schools, some dual enrollment and academy that aren't offered at others, but for the general transfer student, that is the case. And I think Mr. Jamison really articulated that well on the webinar regarding transfer students and our military students. To Dr. Spence's point, if you have not watched that webinar and you're a military family, I highly recommend you do. There was great information from Bobby Jamison there on how we really support our military families.
Yeah, I was gonna add, because, you know, the 4x4 schedule is fairly common in the country. I mean, it is one of the more common schedules, and we do get a lot of families that transfer in here, and it throws them off because they come in and they're unable to match up their schedule with the 4x4 schedule. So the hybrid schedule will give us the opportunity to meet the needs of students who are coming in both of those settings, which is a real bonus for us, particularly given the military community that we serve. So it's a good, I mean, that's really kind of a good added layer of benefit for us.
Is that it, Mrs. Melnick, for you? We'll go to Ms.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We'll go to Mrs. Felton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Dr. Smith, with that note that you finished on, it appears that the students are comparing 4x4 and AB classes apple to oranges. And the presentation that you all gave us, it was excellent, because, you know, we want all our students to succeed. We want all our students to achieve in this, and it sounds great. So I'm concerned that they're confused about the scheduling. And you're saying you're using the military also as it being a good fit for them. So would it be much more a good fit for military students coming in and or our student as a whole? Because I don't want them to be confused about a good thing, and I want them to be able to process it through easier. It'd be an easy process. So I'm just concerned about the 4x4 and the AP classes being confusing. It's like this is like mixing apples with oranges. Could you give me a little bit of understanding on why they will be confused on that?
I think there's a couple of reasons, Ms. Felton. They may be, I won't use the word confused. I think I'll use the word concerned based on their experience in a 4x4 model during the 2020-21 school year. And how that impacted them on their AP classes, how that impacted on their workload, the needs to reevaluate how we pace those courses, as we discussed in the presentation in the last 2 weeks ago, was the staff development to work with teachers on how to slow down the pacing and how to really truly utilize those courses that are on the 4x4 model. As I think other board members stated, I think if this is approved by the board, we're going to have to go out and, again, just communicate broadly some key components of the schedule that were accepted and some of the benefits there, and continue to work with our school counseling department to ensure those one-on-ones with conversations with kids and families are very clear.
I can appreciate that that discussion you're having. I can appreciate that analysis, but I'm just a little bit concerned by approving something that sounds like the students are still concerned. I use the word confused because the student standing before us this evening, she sounded like she was confused about not being able to do all the other things and being compacted by this. Is it necessary to combine 4x4 with the hybrid? Can you just have 4x4 and not the hybrid system?
Yes, you could in some, based on your student selection. If you're talking broadly as a school division, that's not what we're talking about. If you're talking about individual course selection, that possibility would be there. In the presentation that we did 2 weeks ago, I gave you an example of 11th grade student that would be in all 4x4 core classes while they go to the Career and Technical Education Center. I think I had a math course that was on a 4x4, the BA US History, the English 11 course, and maybe a biology or a chemistry course, one of those two. So there is that opportunity, and as I shared earlier this evening, there's some examples such as the young lady who was here tonight who'd probably be predominantly on an AB schedule with a study block embedded in there. Any student that's taking 5 AP classes, we're probably going to really counsel them into having that study block class as often a school counselor will do so that they can manage that workload. That happens often, but I hope that clarifies your question, Ms. Felton. Really where I think the confusion ends for many students is when they sit down and have that conversation with a school counselor. They typically do not always understand that until they really sit and see what the opportunities are. And as Mr. Jamison said in the last meeting, as they map out their pathway for where they see them going throughout their high school career and post-high school goals.
Okay, so what would make this digestible for me? And I'm moving very slowly with it. I'm being concerned about this.
May I interject? Because I think I can help with one extra piece that hasn't been mentioned.
Well, can I just ask this question and you can interject?
Great.
So at the end, will the students and the parents still have a chance to change if they decide to, as they move forward? Will they have that chance to change? Will they be put into this box and not being able to move? And that's it for me.
Yes, Ms. Felton. What they do is when they receive their course request forms, parents have the opportunity to go through that course request form and make change requests. Again, Mr. Jamison, if he didn't do it in the presentation here, I know he did it on the webinar. He really explained that process. But once, and I think Ms. Manning asked the question around 8 courses being selected in that confusion, students then come back and they look at what they've requested. They see how it's being offered. They see if it still meets their needs, and they can request a change to their schedule in that manner, based on what courses are offered.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So that was my point, that it didn't come up tonight, but it definitely came up 2 weeks ago, that they were completing things and that they didn't want. And that's a recipe for whatever we want to call it, confusion, concern. We got a few emails, why is my child, why couldn't they sign up for a study block? And I just called this parent to say, look, they gave, it's an explanation concerning with the nuances of scheduling that I don't understand. But from a parent standpoint, it's very logical to ask, well, why were they why couldn't they put down a study block when they met the first time? Why do we have, and the same with certain children being forced to take certain electives that they know they're not going to take. So I'm sure that is part of the explanation. And as you said, when it's the second step, that'll all get straightened out. But again, there was no way for a parent to know that. Their child comes home and says, well, they wouldn't let me sign up for a study block, or says, well, they made me sign up for tech ed or shop when I wanted art. So
I'd also share with you that that's not unique to this model. In many high schools, they've done that for years, even on the AB. Some have not, but many have. As Mr. Jamison explained, and we talk about, they sign up for those classes so that one does not make, they see what their other choices were, and they make some decisions there on things they previously selected. So that's not completely unique to what we've done in many schools on the AB model.
So the important thing is that they all do get a chance to fix it, correct it, to the extent that I don't mean coming up with something that's not feasible, but those little things will get sorted
Those conversations always take place. And last thing I'll say on it, there's many times we have a student select 8 courses, and many of those are several AP classes, and we counsel them and go, that's a heavy workload with the other things you have going on. You may want to reconsider. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. So they have good one-on-one conversations, and the counselors should know those students and be able to help them through that process.
And I know you did say the counselors seem excited about this. I do have one question, and it actually was generated by a teacher comment tonight. And interestingly enough, it would impact calendar, which is also on our agenda tonight. And I don't expect an answer on the spot, but one teacher did comment at the high school level if they're teaching all 4x4s, they're gonna start with a whole new group of 90 students, and is it possible to add one extra day in between the 2 semesters? And I just thought it was worth discussion here to see if there's any merit to that.
I'll leave that a little bit to the calendar committee. I don't think it's abnormal, and Dr. Robertson, you can tell me if I'm incorrect here, but I don't think it's abnormal to have somewhat of a day imbalance from one semester to the next, or one 9 weeks to the next. But I know we have options on the table around the calendar
I
committee.
mean, the explanation was that it would be potentially a whole new group of students, like the way you start each school year in September. So it was just something I made a note of.
Certainly between semesters, I think you'd want to look at the calendars first. And you remember, if you put any day you pull to make an additional staff day as another instructional day, you've got to find somewhere else, which means you're pulling from a holiday or somewhere else. So
I get it.
those are certainly discussable, but I think you'd want to look at the calendar, because this different options, the semester is going to break at different places, and that may address some of those challenges.
All right, it looks like, also just want to know before we go ahead and vote, final call for questions.
Well, if I could just speak quickly, I'll be really quick. I know, I'm sorry, we're getting ready to vote, but as somebody who has just had 3 kids go right through our schools, our high schools, just to talk to the scheduling process, I understand the student confusion, but I don't think it's unusual. And so certainly relative to the 4x4, because of what we had to do in the pandemic, but I mean, just in general in the scheduling process, you're asked to put down all these courses, and you don't necessarily get those courses, and then you got to go back and you got to reselect different things. And we've never asked kids to pick study blocks. That's never been part of our scheduling process. And so, you go through that, and then you sit down, as Matt said, with your counselor, and then that's where you start to get the clarity of, well, here's how the courses are lining up for you in the master schedule. Do you still want to take this? Well, no, I don't want to take that. I'd rather take this. Is that available? Yes, that's available. So, I mean, I think it's really important to understand it's an ongoing, scheduling is an ongoing process. It's an ongoing process of communication with parents and students throughout the year. So it's not unusual to have a little bit of confusion with our students. And as we're switching over to a new system, we'll continue to make sure we communicate that very clearly.
All right, then, so the motion is to approve I'll read right off the screen, high school scheduling for plan, just high school scheduling 2022-23. Okay, all in favor, show a raised hand, please. Oh, we didn't, no, we took the motions before the discussion, okay.
Ms. Felton, did you need to be added back into the queue?
No, forgot to put my hand down. I would do that now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, but let her, she'll ask her next.
Okay, Ms. Melnick, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Felton, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay, Madam Chair, we have 10 ayes. Ms. Holtz, how did you vote?
Mrs. Holtz?
Oh, okay. Madam Chair, we have a unanimous vote. The motion did pass.
Thank you. One final action item is our adjustment to schedule of meetings. Yes. So we have Mrs. Hughes to thank for pointing out that one of the months turned out to be Mondays instead of Tuesdays. I believe it was it August, Mrs. Hughes? Yeah. So our clerk, we thank our clerk for providing a corrected copy. And that's really the only reason it's on the agenda tonight, because it was previously approved. Yes, ma'am.
Madam Chair, in light of the discussions that were had this evening, are we going to change the February 1st meeting?
Well, the reason. Good, yes. While we're here. So we can offer wording to you. Maybe we can rely on our attorney to do that.
I think what you're going to have, originally we had 2 special meetings for this, and let me go back. Where's February? Okay, February 1st meeting originally was a special meeting for the CIOM for the FY 2022-23 and CIP FY 22-23 through FY 27-28. The CION presentation is now going to move to February 8th on the regular meeting, but you are going to have that special meeting because we were also going to call a second special meeting. So now will be a special meeting for the purposes of meeting with outside counsel, and then an open meeting, a regular, well, a special meeting, open meeting at that point, I believe, to start at 5 o'clock.
Yeah, right. The outside counsel is a closed session.
Right,
That
closed
doesn't show
session,
up on this.
it'll start the meeting at 3 to closed session. It will pick up an open session meeting, I believe we said 5 o'clock or approximately their time
So
for.
I just need your help with what,
We want to.
well, just to open it up for discussion, we
Well,
technically.
before you do,
Oh.
we need to make an additional change. It's related to not to confuse things. I think you want to make sure you have the same number of opportunities for comment on the budget, so we would want to move the adoption of the budget away from March 1st and have that be a special meeting similar to February 15th, which would be budget CIP workshop and public hearing on the budget. And then March the 8th would be your adoption of the budget. It's a formal, regular meeting. We just added to the action item. No, according to Crystal, moving it back 1 week in March will be fine. Yeah, so the way this would read, just to go down the list. So February 1st, special meeting, purpose of discussion of election districts. February 8th, doesn't need to say anything, but for your information, that will be where we present this estimate of needs. February 15th will look the same. It's a special meeting on the budget, public hearing. February the 22nd is going to look the same. You'll have an opportunity for public input on the budget at that meeting. I'm suggesting the March 1 special meeting look the same as the February 15th special meeting, which is another budget workshop and public hearing on the budget prior to what would be then an adoption as an action item on March the 8th. If that works for you all, because I just want to have that clarity before you make a motion so you know what you're making a motion on.
Does anybody need us to go through that again, even though we're not voting yet, but just for the, we'll take the motion now, and then if people need clarity, we'll ask. How's that?
Well, I was just gonna suggest, are we gonna have another close tonight, since we've been here since 2:30? I know there was talk about moving that to the next meeting.
I think Dr. Spence has agreed that it won't take too long, that we can do this tonight, and I think we'll still plan to. We're just about done with this meeting. Okay.
Is there a reason why we wouldn't be able to do it next week, since we're moving some other stuff out of next week's?
Not moving out of, we can extend the time we are here next week, if that's what you're asking. But this has been put off already, but colleagues, do you feel prepared tonight to discuss the evaluation, or do you prefer to be next week and Dr. Spence would?
I can go either way.
Okay, so then let me ask.
I know I'm not there this evening, but every time we have important business to take care of, we have board members that complain about the length of time we stay at these meetings. This is our job. This is our duty to the citizens. We have work to do, and I'm sorry I'm not there to participate. But many of us do not complain about the time that we have to stay, and this is important, and I suggest that you stay and get it done.
It's not that late. It's not like it's, 1 o'clock in the morning like we've done before. It's 9 o'clock, not that late.
Well, let's just, a show of hands of who would like to do the evaluation tonight, and the other option is next week, just to get a feel for, not a formal vote, but who's up for doing it tonight? So kind of split then. Well, six or seven are willing to do it tonight.
And I just have another comment just on general about the calendars. I mean, there are those of us who have jobs. This is not our full-time job. And we have to get up in the morning. We started this meeting at 2:30 today, which is, I mean, in the, prior to COVID, we need to get back to what our meetings used to be like. We start at 4 and we end at 9 was approximately what it used to be. We can't continue these long hours with staff. Staff has to get up early. They are burning the candle at both ends. They have to stay here as long as we have to stay here. I'm not opposed to doing, I'm ready. I can do this closed session tonight, but this just is a pattern. We're starting earlier, we're staying later, and we have jobs, we have families. Staff has families, they have to get up early. The public's watching us as well. They need to get to bed. So I would just like the board to consider this, and we need to run our meetings a little bit more efficiently so that we're not burning the candle at both ends.
I feel there was a lot of important business that was covered today. I mean, I will just leave it at that. Okay. So we are taking a motion to reaffirm this calendar with the adjustments as noted tonight. Is there a motion? Mrs. Anderson, a second. Mrs. Franklin. And does anybody again need any clarity before we vote on what was already presented by Mrs. Linetti and Dr. Spence? So then, all in favor? And our online colleagues, you know what you're voting on, the adjusted dates for February and March?
Yes.
Okay. All right then, all in favor, please show a raised hand.
Ms. Melnick, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Felton, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Madam Chair, we have a unanimous vote. The motion did pass.
All right, thank you. Now we have our committee or liaison reports. So let's get through this with whoever has anything to share. Committee or board liaison reports. We'll start with Mrs. Manning.
So 403B committee met last week. There were some funds that were underperforming, and we were asked to replace those funds. So we did replace 3 of the investment funds. It will take a few months for those to go into effect, and employees will be notified, and they'll reach out with communications on what those funds are. If you have any specific questions, you can reach out to Ms. Pate.
Do you mind just giving a real quick 2 or 3 sentence reminder, and for the public too, on what this committee is?
So it's kind of an oversight committee for our investments for the 403B plans. So we monitor the funds, and there were 3 that were underperforming and not getting the best value for our employees out of their money. So the company that helps provide oversight had made some recommendations to us to replace 3 of those funds, and we've met several times, but this last week we met and we voted to replace those funds.
And you are our board member on the committee of about a dozen, is it?
Yeah, this is combined with city as well. Yes, it's 10 maybe total voting members.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else?
Yes, Chair Rye.
Yes, Mrs. Felton.
If I could just speak briefly about the Virginia School Board Association Capital Conference that took place on Monday and Tuesday. Long 2 days. I just briefly say that we were met and we were honored to have the Honorable Amy Rostov-Garita, the Secretary of Education, and the Honorable Winston Sears, Lieutenant Governor, and the Honorable Julia Balo, Virginia Superintendent of Public Education. They visit our meeting, gave out good information. If you are so inclined, go on the VSBA website and you can get the full meeting, the full essence of the sessions that went on these last 2 days. Also, I had the opportunity to go up to Capitol Hill or to meet with at least 7 of our delegates on today, and that was an exhausting time, but it was really fruitful. and very informative. So any other question that need to be asked, I'm available. Thank you.
Thank you. We do look forward to hearing more, and safe travels back.
Thank you so much.
I just have a point of information real quick to remind people, because I almost forgot myself, but our economic interest forms are due by February 1st.
Thank you.
So I don't want to leave here without giving mine to Regina before we leave tonight.
Thank you. That was on my admit matters list and it didn't make it. So thank you, Mrs. Anderson, for that reminder. All right, then, Mrs. Anderson, this concludes the formal meeting agenda and what we have left is a closed session, so.
So, Tammy, before I read this, should I just stop at number 1? Because we took care of the other.
Yeah, I'm understanding we're not continuing any of the other ones, so just the first one.
I move that the school board recess into closed session in accordance with the exemptions to open meeting laws set forth in Code of Virginia 2.2-3711, Part A, paragraphs 1, 7, and 8 as amended. A1, discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of any public body, namely to discuss, number 1, the superintendent's mid-year evaluation and related matters. I just need a second.
Missa.
Whatever.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, show a raised hand,
Sorry,
please.
Madam Chair, who did the first?
I did, because I read it. I said, I move.
Madam Chair, we have 9 ayes. We can go into close.